Chapter 198. Shatter. Ouyang Qingye flew back in the air, facing each other with a distance of more than 10 meters. Next, I will perform the Dark Snake Sword art with 30% of the concept of darkness. After defeating you, I will break through to the Qi transformation realm. Ouyang Qingye said. His black hair danced wildly as if it had broken free from its shackles, like countless dark snakes rushing towards the sky. His pupils became dark and deep, and even the whites of his eyes seemed to be suffused with traces of black, making him look even more demonic. Around his body, traces of darkness spread out, wriggling like small dark snakes. This aura was extremely shocking. Concept of darkness. Chu Mu carefully sensed it. Among the different mentalities, the 5 elements mentalities are the most common. The other wind mentalities and thunder mentalities are also more common, while the ice mentalities are rarer. For example, the light mentalities and the dark mentalities are even rarer than the ice mentalities. Just like the power mentalities, they all have a power that surpasses the normal mentalities. In other words, the power of 30% of the concept of darkness was actually above the 30% of the concept of wind. With a rumbling sound, Huangfu Shenglong also performed the concept of water. His pupils turned light red, and a light blue current surrounded his body. It was like a small flood dragon that was about to overturn the sea. It also seemed like waves of surging waves. 30% of the concept of water. Ouyang Qingye's eyes flashed with a strange light. Unfortunately, the concept of darkness is more powerful than the concept of water at the same level. Show me your full strength, Huangfu Shenglong. With just mentalities, you are not my opponent. When it's time to use my full strength, I will. Huangfu Shenglong's expression did not change, and his tone was indifferent. Ouyang Qingye did not speak, but the aura around his body became sharper. It was dark and gloomy, as if it was about to absorb the light. Immediately, his sword stabbed out. It was like a hidden snake shooting out. It was as fast as lightning, and everyone could only see a trace of black in front of their eyes. A snake will always be a snake. How can it be the opponent of a flood dragon? With a low roar, Huangfu Shenglong's sword seemed to have turned into a flood dragon, breaking out of the water and clashing with the dark snake. You're talking about an ordinary snake. A dark snake is not inferior to a flood dragon. Ouyang Qingye retorted. Not only was he not at a disadvantage in terms of momentum, he was also not at a disadvantage in terms of words. The Dark Snake Sword art was one of the top sword arts among the high-level sword arts. Its basic form was like a dark snake. Not only was it as fast as lightning, but it was also very quiet. It was very strange and hard to guard against. Raging Flood Dragon Sword Technique was ranked at the top among high-grade sword technique. Its basic moves were like numerous raging flood dragons, possessing a vast and domineering power, as if wanting to crush everything. In the eyes of the crowd, it was as if dragons and dark snakes were spreading across the void and colliding with each other. The flood dragon roared angrily, but the dark snake was strangely silent. The audience held their breaths and stared with their eyes wide open, afraid that they would miss any detail. It was rare to see such a battle between experts, especially when 2 high-level sword arts clashed. They could not miss it. Maybe they could learn something from it and improve their sword arts attainment. Both Ouyang Qingye and Huangfu Shenglong had already cultivated the Dark Snake Sword art and Raging Flood Dragon Sword technique to perfection. Every sword attack was able to fully display the essence and power of the 2 sword art. In front of the crowd, Ouyang Qingye and Huangfu Shenglong seemed to have disappeared. Only a flood dragon and a dark snake were left fighting on the battle stage. The roars of the flood dragon and the hisses of the dark snake rose and fell one after another. The dark snake's body was surrounded by countless black flames, as if it was burning. Suddenly, the flames expanded and exploded, increasing the size of the dark snake by 2 times. It soared into the sky and then swooped down as fast as lightning. It was the killer move of the Dark Snake sword art, Dark Snake Invasion. The flood dragon let out a roar and dove into the surrounding water. In an instant, it broke through the water and soared into the sky, carrying a tyrannical power and an unparalleled aura as it charged towards the Dark Snake. It was the killing move of the Furious Flood Dragon sword technique. Furious Flood Dragon bursting water. The Dark Snake and the Flood Dragon collided, and a terrifying explosion sounded. Black and light blue sword chi splashed in all directions. The Flood Dragon slapped the Dark Snake's body with its claw, but the Dark Snake bit the Flood Dragon's neck. Its sharp teeth sank into the Flood Dragon's body. With a sad cry, the Flood Dragon fell down. The Dark Snake's body was broken, and its lower body fell down. However, its upper body was still rushing towards Huangfu Shenglong. Lose! Ouyang Qingye merged with the Dark Snake's upper body and stabbed his sword down. The power of the Dark Snake sword art was on par with the Raging Flood Dragon sword art, but the mentality of darkness was indeed stronger than the mentality of water. It seemed that Huangfu Shenglong was in danger. Chu Mu's pupils shrank. In the next breath, he would be able to see Huangfu Shenglong's full power. It's still too early for you. Huangfu Shenglong shouted out explosively as a towering aura suddenly surged out from his body. It was like an immovable mountain that could hold up a mountain. There was even a domineering and sharp aura that shook the space, and his entire body seemed to have become 10 times larger. Sword aura! Chumu was shocked. His expression changed drastically, and he almost cried out. Among all the swordsmen he had met so far, besides himself, only the Sword Pavilion Elder of the Green Edge Sword Sect had comprehended Sword Aura. He did not expect to meet the second person who had comprehended Sword Aura here. Moreover, it was someone who had comprehended Sword Aura below the Qi transformation realm. The diving Dark Snake paused in midair. In the next breath, the Sword Aura on Huangfu Shenglong's body surged like water, rushing towards the fake Raging Flood Dragon sword. Chu Mu could clearly feel that the Sword Aura on Huangfu Shenglong's body had been transferred to the fake Raging Flood Dragon sword. The Sword Aura was invisible and colorless, but it was majestic and vast. It was like a monstrous wave that contained sharpness and sharpness. It was unstoppable. Under the Sword Aura, half of the Dark Snake was completely destroyed. Ouyang Qingye's expression changed drastically. Sword Qi gathered in front of him, and he waved his sword. An earth-shattering boom shook the surroundings. The black sword Qi was completely shattered. Ouyang Qingye's body was thrown into the air by the huge force. He could not hold onto the fake sword anymore. After landing, he took 3 steps back before he could stop. His face was pale at first, but then it turned into an unhealthy red. His throat squirmed, and it was obvious that he was trying to swallow the blood that he was about to spit out. Huangfu Shenglong's body did not move at all. He stood on the stage like a mountain, pointing his sword at Ouyang Qingye. The sword aura on his body had disappeared, but he still looked powerful. Only Chu Mu could feel the weakness in Huangfu Shenglong's body. "You are not my opponent," Huangfu Shenglong said word by word. Ouyang Qingye's expression suddenly changed. "Humph, I knew it. This pretty boy is definitely not Brother Shenglong's opponent." Huangfu Fian laughed happily. Huangfu Kuang did not say anything. He could see that Huangfu Shenglong had already used his full strength in this battle. The sword aura was Huangfu Shenglong's trump card. It would not be easy for him to win. Although Huangfu Shenglong and Ouyang Qingye had both held back, it was still a strand of Xiantian sword qi. Once the Xiantian sword qi was used, it would no longer be a battle of victory, but a battle of life and death. There was no need for that. Ouyang Qingye's expression returned to normal. He picked up the fake sword and sheathed it. "You have won this battle. But only after reaching the Qi transformation realm can one be considered to have stepped into the true world of swordsmen. Our battle has only just begun." As he spoke, Ouyang Qingye walked down the arena and left. His movements seemed to be a little difficult. It was obvious that he had suffered heavy internal injuries. Huang Fu Shenglong let out a sigh of relief. A wave of weakness attacked both his mind and body. He wanted to lie down, but he had no choice but to maintain his current state in front of everyone. He wanted to make others think that it was not difficult for him to win. Huang Fu Shenglong's sword aura is also at the entry level, which is the same as mine. But in terms of the application of sword aura, he is better than me. On the way back to the fifth sword tower, Chu Mu kept replaying the scene of Huang Fu Shenglong condensing his sword aura on the fake sword. That sword aura was extremely powerful. Chu Mu believed that if he were in Huang Fu Shenglong's shoes, he would not be able to block it. Unless he used 40% of the wind concept or Xiantian sword chi, he would have to use his sword aura to resist. But obviously, his application of sword aura was not as good as Huang Fu Shenglong's. Sword aura integrated into the sword and released. Unknowingly, Chu Mu walked into the sword tower. He was still immersed in his thoughts. Chu Mu did not care what kind of posture he was sitting in. In short, he completely ignored everything else. His mind was completely immersed in Huang Fu Shenglong's sword. After thinking for a long time, Chu Mu could only stop thinking and empty his mind. He stared at the white clouds in the sky and did not think about anything else. After an unknown period of time, Chu Mu suddenly had an idea. Since it is the application of sword aura, I naturally have to start from the sword aura. Silently muttering, Chu Mu's mind surged with the comprehension of sword force. On his body, a majestic aura, like that of a mountain, naturally rose. Within it contained a shocking sharpness. How can I transfer the sword aura to the sword and use the sword to release the power of the sword aura? Although my sword aura is also at the entry level, it is very passive in its application. It can only be used to intimidate and cannot form an effective attack. But if I gather the sword aura on the sword and release it like Huang Fu Shenglong, then I will be able to display the offensive side of the sword aura. And its power is extremely strong. Huang Fu Shenglong's sword not only defeated Ouyang Qingye's dark snake attack, but also defeated Ouyang Qingye's sword aura. In the end, it also caused Ouyang Qingye to suffer a serious internal injury. Compared to the furious dragon breaking water that had integrated 30% of the water essence, it was even more tyrannical. Chu Mu felt that if he could master how to integrate the sword aura into the sword and release it, he would have another trump card. His overall strength would be significantly improved. While others were discussing the battle between Huang Fu Shenglong and Ouyang Qingye, Chu Mu stayed in his sword tower and was once again immersed in thinking about the application of sword aura. As soon as Huang Fu Shenglong returned to the sword tower, he immediately sat down and breathed a sigh of relief. His face was a little pale. With his current ability, releasing the sword aura to attack was still a little difficult. The burden was too great. Perhaps it would be better if he broke through to the Qi transformation realm. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 199. Chu Mu stood on the first floor of the sword tower with his sword in hand. His sword aura fluctuated as if it wanted to flow to the sword in his hand, but it seemed to be obstructed by something. If I can personally experience the attack of the sword aura, I might be able to understand, Chu Mu thought to himself. He had no choice but to disperse the sword aura. Experiencing it personally was the most direct and effective method. It was many times faster than cultivating behind closed doors. Of course, there was also the possibility of danger. I heard that Huang Fu Shenglong is about to break through to the Qi transformation realm and is currently in seclusion to prepare. What a pity! Chu Mu thought to himself. He left the sword tower and headed for the small sword pagoda. A new round of the small sword pagoda ranking battles had begun. This was Chu Mu's third time participating in the small sword pagoda ranking battles after entering the Great Koan Sword Mansion. He had obtained good rankings in the first 2 times, and each time, his ranking was higher than the last. The small sword pagoda was bustling with noise and excitement. Apart from the top 3, everyone else had come here to participate in the small sword pagoda ranking battles. It could be said that Chu Mu had spurred everyone on. Huang Fu Fian rolled her eyes and said to Chu Mu, "Hey, cold-faced man, how about we have a competition?" A sly smile appeared on her face. "How do we compete?" Chu Mu faintly smiled and said, "It's very simple. We're going to challenge the small sword pagoda in a bit. Let's compete and see who has a higher ranking wins," Huang Fu Fian said with a smile. Huang Fu Kuang stood to the side, the corner of his mouth twitching. He didn't say a word. "Sure, but what if I win? So what if I lose?" Chu Mu faintly smiled and said, "It's impossible for me to lose." Huang Fu Fian puffed out her chest and said confidently, "That's not necessarily true." Chu Mu said, "Let's talk about the outcome first. If I win, you have to agree to a condition of mine. No matter what it is, you have to comply." Huang Fu Fian rolled her eyes and said, "If you win, I will also agree to a condition of yours." "Does that mean I have to comply with all conditions?" Chu Mu asked with a smile. Huang Fu Fian seemed to be hesitating. Chu Mu didn't say a word and just looked at Huang Fu Fian. Huang Fu Fian gritted her teeth and said, "Fine, you win. I can promise you one thing. I'll comply with anything." The corners of Huang Fu Kuang's mouth twitched again, but he still didn't say anything. The bet between Chu Mu and Huang Fu Fian was only a small interlude. Soon, 100 names appeared on the metal sword ranking. 100 students flew into the small sword pagoda. At the same time, the 100 incense sticks were lit. Among the 100 students, only 3 of them were on the iron sword ranking. These 3 people had persisted for a relatively long time, and each of them had more than 40 incense sticks. Very quickly, the second batch entered the small sword pagoda. This batch did not have anyone on the iron sword ranking, so they could only last until the 35th incense stick. Huang Fu Changtian entered the third batch. During this half a year of cultivation, Huang Fu Changtian's overall strength had an obvious improvement. However, the others wouldn't fall behind by much. In the end, Huang Fu Changtian persisted until the 38th incense stick, which was an improvement compared to the previous time. Lian Qingyun entered the fourth batch. In the end, Lian Qingyun also persisted until the 38th incense stick. It could be said that Huang Fu Changtian was neck and neck. The 2 of them seemed to be fated opponents. After that, Sun Changfeng, Huang Fu Bingning, Gao Guling, Nangong Haoyang, and the others also had some improvement, but it wasn't especially obvious. Luo Yufeng felt that after a period of cultivation, his overall strength had improved quite a bit. Thus, he had the idea of testing himself and signed up to participate in the Small Sword Pagoda's challenge. In the end, he persisted for 2 more incense sticks than the first time. In terms of strength, he had indeed improved. Xie Donghua, who was defeated by Chu Mu, also participated, but his improvement was only a little. As for Han Ao, he also participated, but there was almost no improvement. Han Ao kept staring at Chu Mu, thinking about how to get Chu Mu to join the Proud Sword Gang. He increasingly felt that if Chu Mu joined, the Proud Sword Gang would definitely become very powerful in the future. Batch after batch of students entered the Small Sword Pagoda to challenge. Although the Small Sword Pagoda's challenge method had never changed, many people had already participated several times. However, this experience only allowed them to deal with it more freely in the beginning. Once they reached the end, when the enemies became stronger and more numerous, they wouldn't be able to deal with it. Everything still depended on one's own strength. As long as one's strength was sufficient, they would be able to sweep through everything. After another batch, Huang Fu Fian's name instantly appeared on the metal sword leaderboard. Cold-faced man, it's my turn. Watch carefully. Huang Fufian raised her fist and waved it in front of Chu Mu. With a flash, her figure nimbly landed in front of the small sword pagoda like a swallow. Brother Chu, let me tell you something. The bet with little Fian is the most unreliable. Huang Fu Kuang took advantage of the opportunity when Huang Fu Fian entered the small sword pagoda to approach Chu Mu and whisper, as if he was afraid that Huang Fu Fian would hear him. Why? Chu Mu was a little puzzled. Because if she wins, she'll definitely think of strange conditions to make things difficult for you, and you won't know whether to laugh or cry. But if she loses, she'll play dumb and think of all sorts of excuses and methods to delay until nothing is settled. Huang Fu Kuang spoke with an extremely emotional expression, as if he had suffered greatly. Chu Mu only smiled and didn't take it to heart. In fact, he had a general idea of Huang Fufian's strength after a short fight with her. If it was a ranking battle in the small sword pagoda, Chu Mu was 100% confident that he could beat her. Even if Huang Fufian reneged on the bet after losing, Chu Mu didn't care. This was originally just a small fun process, and he didn't care about the result. Brother Chu, please don't tell anyone that I told you this. Otherwise, if little Fian finds out, I will definitely be in big trouble, Huang Fu Kuang warned. Chu Mu nodded. Inside the small sword pagoda, Huang Fu Fian, who had just killed a powerful enemy, suddenly felt her nose itch and couldn't help but sneeze. It must be that big guy talking bad about me. When I get out, I have to force him to tell me what he said. Huang Fu Fian muttered to herself. Her figure moved like a swallow, dodging the enemy's attack and counterattacking like a swallow. The time burned one by one, and one by one, students were ejected. In the end, only Huang Fu Fian was left fighting inside. The time had already burned to the 60th section. Last time, little Fian lasted until the 88th section. She didn't participate several times. Her strength is much stronger than before. Maybe this time, she can last until the 90th section. That way, her ranking will definitely be higher, Huang Fu Kuang said. Oh, how many sections did Huang Fu Xinglong last? Chu Mu suddenly asked. Last time, Big Brother Xinglong lasted for 94 sections. If he comes again, he can definitely last until the 95th section, Huang Fu Kuang said with certainty. Chu Mu nodded thoughtfully. Right, according to what you know, what's the record for the longest section? It's said that someone lasted until the 99th section. That seems to be the highest record. Huang Fu Kuang thought for a moment and said, however, the 99th section is too difficult. I feel that even the current Big Brother Xinglong can't do it. After all, the further you go, the more powerful the enemies will be. The slightest carelessness will cause you to lose. Chu Mu nodded. At this time, the time had already burned to the 91st section. A figure was ejected and safely landed on the ground. In a flash, she appeared in front of Chu Mu, her face full of pride. Huang Fu Fian raised her fist and said, What do you think, cold-faced man? I lasted for 91 incense sticks, even more than the pretty boy. This time, I can at least move up a rank. You should admit defeat as soon as possible. You're the one who has to admit defeat. Chu Mu smiled. Then I'll wait. Huang Fu Fian snorted and stood to the side. Her eyes darted around as if she was thinking of something. After another 2 batches, Chu Mu's ranking appeared on the Iron Sword leaderboard. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 200. Brother Chu, let's see who can last the longest in the small sword pagoda. How about it? Huang Fu Kuang grinned as he looked at his name on the Iron Sword ranking. This guy was quite scheming. He knew that although Chu Mu's ranking wasn't low in the previous 2 small sword pagoda ranking battles, he didn't last long in the time incense. At least, compared to those with similar rankings, there was a huge difference. He didn't have the confidence to surpass Chu Mu in terms of ranking, so he proposed an alternative method. How do we determine victory or defeat? Chumu asked. Victory or defeat? Huang Fuquang was startled. He proposed this competition on a whim and didn't think of anything else. He couldn't answer for a moment. If you win, I'll call you Big Brother. If you lose, you'll have to call me Big Brother, Huang Fuquang said. Okay. Chumu nodded. The two entered the small sword pagoda and began the challenge. The reason why I didn't last long in the first two small sword pagoda ranking battles was because my killing speed was too fast. But this time, I can slow down my killing speed and use these enemies to practice my sword art. After entering the pagoda, Chumu took advantage of the fact that the enemies had yet to appear and thought to himself. Soon, the first enemy appeared. He only had the cultivation of peak 10th phase sword chi. Chumu casually swung his sword, and a needle-like golden light pierced through the air. Before the enemy could react, a bloody hole appeared on his neck and he dissipated. Too weak. The second enemy appeared and was killed with a single strike. Although Chumu had already slowed down his killing speed, the enemies that appeared before him were too weak. They couldn't block a casual strike from Chumu. Chumu drew his sword and used Golden Edge Sword Technique's basic move. His Golden Edge Sword Technique was currently between perfection and transcendence. Thus, every strike was very casual and easy. In the spotlessly white room, there wasn't even a drop of blood on the ground. Every enemy that appeared died under Chumu's casual strike. The only thing that could be seen was a needle-like golden light piercing through the air. Moreover, the enemy's throat or forehead were immediately pierced through and died. Not even a drop of blood was spilled. Compared to when he had just entered the outer palace, Chumu's strength had increased by at least several times. The current him could kill the Chumu of half a year ago with a single sword strike. Without moving his body, Zhang Xian thrust out his sword once more. A golden light pierced through the air, and the half-step Qi transformation realm cultivator died before he could even react. A gust of wind came from behind. Chumu stepped aside to avoid the attack. Without even turning his head, he swung his sword back. A thin golden light cut through the opponent's throat, killing him in one strike. More and more enemies died under Chumu's sword. Finally, a stream of blood flew out and splattered on the white wall like scarlet ink. It was a ghastly sight. Chumu no longer killed his enemies with a single strike, because it had become very difficult to do so now. He continued to display the basic moves of the gold-edged sword art, and Chumu carefully sensed and comprehended them. Alternating between the phantom step and wind walk, his figure became unpredictable and hard to catch. The pseudo-clearwind sword was incomparably sharp. Every strike would leave behind a thin golden light, emitting an astonishing sharpness. In the blink of an eye, the 51st incense stick had been burned. I wonder how many incense sticks Chumu will be able to last this time? Some people began to whisper. The first time, he lasted 39 incense sticks. The second time, he lasted 50 incense sticks. According to his progress, he should be able to last until the 60th incense stick. But it's hard to say how high he'll rank in the end. Maybe he'll be able to move up 1 or 2 ranks. Someone analyzed seriously. Even he felt that it was very reasonable and nodded repeatedly. Didn't you hear Huang Fuquang's suggestion? I think this time, Chumu definitely won't leave the small sword pagoda so quickly. He'll definitely be able to last longer, at least 80 incense stick. If you don't believe me, let's make a bet. Let's make a bet. I bet that Chumu can last for 90 incense stick. You despicable. I should be the one who bet that Chumu can last for 90 incense stick. Are you stupid? Chumu is so strong. If he really wants to, he can definitely last for 90 incense sticks. Do you want to bet? Bet, why wouldn't I? I bet that Chumu can last for 91 incense stick. F*CK, what kind of bet is this? Why do you care? Do you want to bet or not? I'd be stupid to bet with you. Time flew by. Soon, it was the 60th incense stick. Now 90 people had been sent out. There were still 10 people fighting in the small sword pagoda. When the 70th incense stick was lit, there were still 4 people fighting in the small sword pagoda. When the 80th incense stick was lit, there were still 2 people fighting in the small sword pagoda. It was Chu Mu and Huang Fuquang. In the room that had turned scarlet again, 10 strong enemies were attacking Chu Mu from all directions. These 10 strong enemies were not only at the peak of the half-step Qi transformation stage, but they had also cultivated their swordsmanship to perfection. Moreover, they had all comprehended 29% of the sword intent. They had also cultivated their high-level movement techniques to perfection. Although they couldn't speak and didn't have much intelligence, they had extremely strong battle instincts. They knew how to eliminate all unnecessary movements. Every move they made was the most direct, concise, and effective attack. Chu Mu was under great pressure. He could no longer use the basic moves of the gold-tip swordsmanship with ease. He had no choice but to use his killing moves to counterattack. Gold-tip sundering the sky. Cloud-shattering sword explosion. Gale shaking the forest. Using it consecutively and combining it with the perfect phantom step, Chu Mu was finally able to defeat these 10 powerful enemies. But before he could breathe a sigh of relief, another 10 strong enemies appeared and attacked him with their swords. With the increase in pressure, Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. He immediately took out a second fake sword from the space bracelet and held it in his left hand. After a long period of trial and error, Chu Mu had cultivated the dual swordsmanship to the small success stage yesterday. The small success stage of the dual swordsmanship was already able to increase his strength. He used the gold-tip swordsmanship in both his left and right hands. They turned into 2 thin golden rays that pierced through the air. The hallmark of the small success stage of the dual swordsmanship was to be able to use the same swordsmanship. For example, stabbing with both hands would not feel awkward and would not lose sight of the other. On the contrary, it would be like stabbing with one hand. It would be as if 2 people of the same mind were stabbing with their swords. When the dual swordsmanship was further consolidated at the small success stage, one would be able to use the same swordsmanship with both swords. Chu Mu had only just reached the small success stage. When using both swords, he could only use the same basic move. Even so, Chu Mu's strength had increased by at least 20%. He blocked an attack with one sword and slashed out diagonally, instantly killing a strong enemy. He turned around and used his sword to block another attack. Then, he used his defensive sword to counterattack. The dual swordsmanship was not a swordsmanship. It did not have any specific moves. Instead, it was an application of swordsmanship. The moves were completely based on other swordsmanship. It could be said that the dual swordsmanship was a secret technique. However, once this secret technique was successfully cultivated, it would not cause any burden. As the strong enemies surrounded him, Chu Mu turned around and used both swords at almost the same time to use the killer move, sky-splitting golden edge. 2 needle-like golden rays followed Chu Mu's body and formed a circle with golden edges. They disappeared into the void and cut through the bodies of the strong enemies. All of them were cut in half at the waist. Chapter 90. Incense-burning Huang Fufian stared at the time and then at the small sword pagoda. Her heart almost jumped out of her chest as she clenched her fists. "Come out, come out!" Little Mouth kept muttering, hoping that Chu Mu would be ejected quickly. "Kill!" The 2 swords clashed. 2 needle-like golden rays formed across and killed 4 strong enemies. He turned around and used backstab. With a light tap of his foot, he leaped into the air and dove down from above. The 2 swords slashed out like lightning. Actual combat was the best way to improve. Through a continuous stream of powerful enemies, Chu Mu's dual sword technique attainments were constantly becoming more and more profound. It had already gone from the initial small success stage to the true small success stage. He wasn't far from being able to use the same sword technique with different basic forms at will. Like a fish in water, with 2 swords in hand, he was invincible. With one sword for defense and one sword for attack, he alternated between attack and defense with great agility. Sometimes he would use both swords at the same time to instantly kill the strong enemies. Chapter 91. Incense Burning. Humph, you're lucky you're not stupid. Otherwise, you'd lose miserably if you bet with me. An old student who almost lost to Chu Mu laughed proudly. Then do you think Chu Mu can last until the 90 or so incense sticks? Another old student retorted, unwilling to admit defeat. It's over, it's over. I'm going to lose this time. Huang Fufian's face was filled with anxiety. She was so anxious that she stomped her feet. She kept looking at the time incense and found that it was almost finished. In terms of length of time, Chu Mu had already surpassed her. At this moment, a figure was ejected and landed safely. He's out, he's finally out. Even if he lasted a bit longer, his ranking might not be higher than mine. Huang Fufian let out a sigh of relief. Soon after, her face stiffened because the person who came out wasn't Chu Mu, but Huang Fu Kuang. Whatever, I didn't say anything. Huang Fufian's expression kept changing. She was hesitant. She wanted to stay and see how many incense sticks Chu Mu could last, but she also wanted to leave quickly and renege on her promise. In the end, her habit of reneging defeated her curiosity. Huang Fufian ran away like a wisp of smoke. Huang Fu Kuang happened to look over and was stunned for a moment. He then smiled bitterly, as expected. The 92nd incense stick burned, but Chu Mu still hadn't come out. Everyone held their breath. They felt that one incense stick's time was as long as a year. The 93rd incense stick burned. The 94th incense stick burned. Could it be that Chu Mu wants to take first place in one go? A voice voiced out everyone's thoughts. The 94th incense stick is almost finished. The 95th incense stick. He's already surpassed Huang Fu Shenglong's record. The 96th incense stick. Legend has it that the highest record is 99 incense sticks. Could it be that he's aiming for the highest record? Everyone couldn't calm down. All kinds of discussions rose and fell. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 201. The two swords danced in the air like a bolt of lightning. This swift and violent attack instantly killed the last enemy, filling the air with a bloody mist. Outside the small sword pagoda, the 99th incense stick began to burn. 99th incense stick, he really did it. He broke the legendary record. Everyone's mouth was wide open as they sucked in a breath of cold air. Their brains were about to short-circuit. Another 10 strong enemies appeared, and their strength was obviously stronger. The pressure on Chu Mu increased as he fought. There were 3 wounds on his body, and blood kept flowing out. The 3rd style of the golden edge sword art in his left hand, and the 8th style in his right. It's rumored that when the dual sword technique is trained to the large success stage, one will be able to use 2 swords to perform different sword technique. The power will be even more powerful. Chu Mu thought to himself as he used the golden edge sword technique to fight. Now, his lower-level dual sword art had finally stabilized under this bloody battle. He could execute any basic style of the same sword art as he wished. His overall strength had increased by 30% compared to when he used a single sword. Phantom Steps was executed to the limit, and the 10 phantoms were unpredictable. Cloud-shattering sword explosion. Cloud-shattering sword explosion. The 2 swords separated as they executed their respective cloud sword art. Suddenly, countless cloud sword chi as thick as a finger shot out in all directions, almost covering the entire room. Only the spot where Chu Mu was standing was spared. 99 incense sticks have finished burning. An ear-piercing scream sounded. Thousands of eyes were focused on the 100 sticks of incense. The 99th incense stick had finished burning, and finally 100 incense sticks. 100 incense sticks. This scream was incomparably mournful, as if someone's chrysanthemum had been ruthlessly stabbed with a mace. breaking the record 100 incense sticks. Huang Fuquang was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that a competition with Chu Mu would break the record. Inside the small sword pagoda, the endless scarlet blood on the ground and walls suddenly emitted a dazzling light. A figure slowly condensed and rapidly absorbed all the scarlet blood. In the end, a swordsman wearing a red swordsman's robe with long hair as red as blood shot out a demonic scarlet light from his eyes and instantly landed on Chu Mu's body. Immediately, Chu Mu's hair stood on end and his muscles unconsciously tightened, almost unable to breathe. He felt as if all the muscles in his body had been struck by a high-voltage electric current. His entire body was paralyzed, and he couldn't move at all. A kind of trembling feeling came from the bottom of his heart, and it wanted to destroy his soul and body. It was as if his soul was being pulled by an invisible bloody hand into a bloody purgatory, sinking deeper and deeper. Even if it's hell, I'll break it with my sword. Chu Mu's eyes suddenly shot out an incomparably sharp light that pierced through the void. His sword aura surged violently, and with a mysterious trajectory, it gathered on the fake clear wind sword in his hand like a cool breeze. Immediately, the fake clear wind sword became as heavy as 10,000 jin. With a loud shout, Chu Mu released all the power in his body. With a slash of his sword, the terrifying sword aura turned into a thunderous force that tore a hole in the blood purgatory. With a kacha-kacha sound like a mirror shattering, the blood purgatory collapsed. In the milky white room, Chu Mu's face was pale. Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead and slid down his cheek. A feeling of weakness emerged from his soul and body, making it difficult for him to even stand. The sword in his hand almost fell to the ground. The bloody figure in front of him was like a demonic god from purgatory. With a light wave of the bloody sword in his hand, a solid bloody sword light shot through the air. Chu Mu was unable to dodge and was directly killed. A figure was ejected and landed on the ground. He's out, he's finally out, 100 incense sticks. Although it's only the 100th stick, it has already broken the previous record and created a new record. Unbelievable. All kinds of discussions could be heard, and it was extremely noisy. Chu Mu shifted his gaze and looked. The 100 sticks of incense had already burned to the last stick, but it had only just begun to burn. He let out a breath and dispelled the depression in his heart. His pale face gradually regained its color. "You've won, big brother," Huang Fuquang said sincerely. He was now sincerely convinced. He believed that even the current Huang Fu Shenglong would not be able to persist until the 99th stick of incense, let alone the 100th stick. Calling such a person big brother was not only a disgrace to him, but it was also his fortune. Nodding, Chu Mu smiled slightly. Although the sword qi in his body had completely recovered, and his physical strength had also recovered, waves of weakness came from his soul. It was as if he had overused his brain and was giving off bursts of stabbing pain. Without waiting for the Iron Sword leaderboard to announce the rankings, Chu Mu left first. He was certain that the first place would be none other than him. Another round of the small sword pagoda ranking battle ended. Lien Qingyun and the others looked at Chu Mu's back as he left, unable to produce any thoughts of resistance. The gap between them was too big, and it was getting bigger and bigger. They were not in the same world. They all knew that in this world, there was a kind of person who was born to be looked up to. This kind of person was destined to live an extraordinary and brilliant life. Wherever they went, they would leave their shadow behind and be branded in people's hearts. It was like the legends they had heard one after another. In a daze, they seemed to have seen a new legend slowly unfold. "What, you actually persisted until the 100th stick of incense?" Huang Fufian jumped up in shock. Her expression was very comical. Compared to persisting until the 100th stick of incense, first place was nothing. "Fortunately, I left in time." After a while, Huang Fufian reacted and revealed a proud smile. She said to Huang Fuquang, "Look at how smart I am." Otherwise, who knows what kind of conditions that cold-faced man would have brought up. No, if he comes to me with conditions, I'll pretend I'm not here and focus on cultivation. My will is almost at 30%. Once I reach 30%, I'll immediately prepare to break through to the chi transformation realm. At that time, he definitely won't be able to find me. Big guy, you must remember not to tell the cold-faced man anything. Otherwise, I'll definitely find out and settle accounts with you. Huang Fuquang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Huang Fufian was usually too lazy to cultivate. He didn't expect her to be determined to cultivate diligently and break through to the chi transformation realm as soon as possible. Shaking his head, Huang Fuquang didn't say anything and left the fourth tower. He walked back to his own tower. At the same time, a meeting was being held in the Palace Lord's tower. The content of the meeting revolved around Chu Mu. After reaching an agreement, a deacon from the Hundred Affairs Hall was sent to Chu Mu's tower. Chu Mu, who had won first place, was qualified to challenge Huang Fu Shunglong. However, Huang Fu Shunglong was currently in seclusion, preparing to break through to the chi transformation realm. Therefore, Chu Mu couldn't challenge him. Although I don't know why such a powerful enemy appeared in the small sword pagoda at the end, I'm sure that Guy's sword chi cultivation was at the chi transformation realm. Moreover, he wasn't an ordinary chi transformation realm cultivator, Chu Mu said with certainty. His eyes were filled with contemplation. That casual sword strike contained a strange concept. It wasn't a concept I've seen before, but it was similar to the concept of water. Could it be the concept of blood? But that's not the main point. The main point is that I successfully condensed the sword force on my sword and released it. The power of that strike was earth-shattering. Chu Mu's eyes burst with a shocking light. He suddenly stood up and pulled out his sword. The sword force surged out, but he was still unable to condense it on his sword. No, it still doesn't work. Why not? What is it that I'm missing? Chu Mu frowned. He sat down again and pondered. The situation at that time was that his soul seemed to have been pulled into a bloody purgatory. He couldn't extricate himself and kept sinking. It was as if he was going to die. Chu Mu didn't know if his soul would fall into oblivion and he would become a living dead person if he fell into oblivion. But in that dangerous situation, his potential was completely stimulated. He released a sword strike that he couldn't normally release, surpassing his own limits. And now, Chu Mu wanted to grasp that momentary flash of inspiration to once again release that inconceivable sword and then control it. It was a difficult process. Not long after, the seal of the sword pagoda was triggered, alarming Chu Mu. When he walked out of the sword pagoda, he saw a deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs standing outside. He was looking at Chu Mu with a smile. Chu Mu, congratulations on obtaining first place on the Iron Sword list, the deacon said. Thank you, Chu Mu responded politely. I'm looking for you because I have something very important to tell you. At the same time, it's also very good news, the Hall of Hundred Affairs said with a smile. The deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs smiled and did not keep them in suspense. He continued, since you have broken the previous record and created a new one, the chief has decided to reward you by increasing your time in the cultivation Holy Land by 100 times. In other words, in addition to the 178 hours that you should have for first place, you will receive an additional 188 hours in total. When Chu Mu heard this, he immediately let out a smile. To him, this was indeed a pretty good piece of news. Okay, I'm done. I believe that with so much time in the cultivation sanctum, your strength will definitely improve by leaps and bounds again, the deacon said. He then said goodbye. Although he was in the chi transformation realm, and was not someone that ordinary chi transformation realm cultivators could compare with, when facing people like Chu Mu, he would always treat him as an equal or even humbly. This was because he was very clear that his lifetime achievement would probably only be in the Qi-Si realm or the ninth transformation realm at most. However, people like Chu Mu could at least reach the ninth transformation realm or even the origin realm. Even if they were in the same realm, he would not be Chu Mu's opponent. The gap between them had already determined each other's achievements. Not bad, 288 hours is enough for me to raise my metal essence to 30%. At that time, I will break through to the Qi transformation realm and directly raise my metal cloud dual wills to the initial success, Chu Mu said to himself. He returned to the second floor of the Sword Pagoda and pondered over the problem from before. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 202. Sword momentum is formless and colorless. It can't be seen or touched, but it's the embodiment of a swordsman's profound understanding of swordsmanship. It's the integration of one's essence, qi, and spirit into a sword. Displaying sword momentum doesn't consume sword aura, but essence, qi, and spirit. To put it more accurately, it consumes one's mental strength and physical strength. I can feel the flow of the sword momentum formed by the integration of essence, qi, and spirit, but when I want to condense the sword momentum into the sword in my hand, it seems to be blocked by something. I can't do it? Inside the fifth tower, Chu Mu stood on the first floor with a sword in hand. There was an aura all over his body that was condensed into one. His essence, qi, and spirit were completely integrated, and he could control it freely. After a period of comprehension, Chu Mu still hadn't figured out how to condense the sword momentum into the sword and release it to form a powerful attack. However, he was much more proficient in controlling the sword momentum. He was only one step away from being able to control it as he wished. If he could reach the level of being able to control it as he wished, he would be able to easily condense the sword momentum into the sword in his hand. This was the third day since Chu Mu won first place in the new small sword pagoda ranking battle. Sheathing his sword, Chu Mu walked out of the tower and headed outside. Walking out of the seal, Chu Mu planned to go to the sacred cultivation ground. He had already comprehended 25% of the metal concept. Perhaps he would be able to comprehend 26% today. Chu Mu estimated that he hadn't used up all the time in the sacred cultivation ground. In fact, he didn't even need to use half of the time to comprehend 30%. As soon as he walked out of the seal, a gust of wind suddenly blew over. The air flow accelerated and quickly came from afar. It blew past Chu Mu and behind him. Chu Mu subconsciously looked back and was stunned. There were many air flows flowing in the direction of the third tower. Chu Mu could clearly feel the fluctuation of spirit qi becoming more intense. It came from all directions and converged into the third tower. With a slight movement of his body, Chu Mu floated forward along with the airflow. He quickly arrived outside the seal of the third sword tower. He saw that the airflow above the third sword tower had converged from afar, forming a cyclone that was gradually becoming more and more substantial. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Even further away, above the second sword tower, a cyclone also appeared. Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. He quickly rushed towards the second sword tower and looked at the first sword tower. Sure enough, there was also a cyclone rotating rapidly above the first sword tower. A large amount of spirit qi flowed over from afar. The speed of the spirit qi became faster and more violent, forming the momentum of a surging river and waves. Violent and mighty whistling sounds continuously rang out, shocking the surroundings. An elder from the holy land of cultivation looked up at the sky and muttered, "This abnormal fluctuation of spirit qi. Someone is about to break through to the qi transformation realm. Big Brother Shenglong is about to break through." Huang Fu Kuang and a large group of people came from afar. "What a huge spirit qi whirlpool!" many people exclaimed. In the past 100 years, the largest spirit chi whirlpool for outer house students to break through to the chi transformation realm was 70 meters, but there was only one. Huang Fu Shenglong's group's 50 meters is already in the top 10. Soon, above the three sword towers, the cyclone had condensed into a whirlpool with a diameter of 50 meters. It spun crazily, continuously absorbing spirit chi from afar and pouring it into the sword towers. It rumbled loudly with great momentum. The flow of the airflow formed an extremely strong storm. It whistled and attacked, making it impossible for people to get close to the sword towers. Their entire bodies were almost blown away. They had to use their sword chi to stabilize their bodies, but their eyes were unable to open due to the wind. Chu Mu stood majestically in the strong wind. 40% of the wind concept allowed him to ignore this kind of strong wind. When breaking through to the chi transformation realm, one will communicate with the outside world. From the inside out, one will transform acquired sword chi into Xiantian sword chi and crazily absorb spirit chi from the outside world. Because the flow of spirit chi is too fast and too fierce, it will form a spirit chi whirlpool. As his strength increased, Chu Mu's knowledge also gradually increased. When a normal sword artist breaks through to the chi transformation realm, they will only be able to form a spirit chi whirlpool about 10 meters in diameter. The higher the talent and the deeper the foundation of the sword artist, the bigger the spirit chi whirlpool. 50 meters. This means that the three of them are far superior to others in terms of talent and foundation. Because they were too close, although the strong wind was unable to affect Chu Mu, the pressure that gradually condensed into a suppressive aura came crushing over. It was as if a chi transformation realm expert was releasing his own aura to invade the surroundings. The pressure was heavy, especially with the 50-meter spirit chi whirlpools above the three sword towers. The pressure created by the spirit chi whirlpools was even more intense, making it difficult for Chu Mu to breathe. Subconsciously, he combined his essence, chi, and soul. His sword aura surged and condensed into a sword, resisting the powerful spirit chi whirlpool. As if sensing Chu Mu's resistance, the spirit chi whirlpool seemed to be angered. The rumbling sound of thunder became even louder, and the pressure became even more intense. The huge pressure immediately made Chu Mu enter a strange state. It was as if he had returned to the small sword pagoda and was facing that terrifying enemy. He was about to be suppressed in purgatory, never to rise again. Purely out of instinct, Chu Mu pulled out his sword. His sword aura rushed towards the fake clear wind sword like water. A formless yet incomparably powerful blade aura condensed, and he slashed out. With a loud rumbling sound, a vacuum could be faintly seen within the countless strong wind currents. The surrounding air currents paused, and the vacuum rushed towards the sword tower's seal with lightning speed. It heavily bombarded the seal, causing it to cave in. The seal bounced back and shattered the remaining attack, creating countless ripples at the same time. So that's how it is, I finally understand. Heartfelt joy welled up in his heart. Chu Mu slashed out with his sword again. Immediately, the sword aura condensed on the sword in his hand, turning into an incomparably powerful blade aura that slashed out. Once again, the chaotic air currents created a vacuum. An intense feeling of weakness immediately surged through his body. Chu Mu hurriedly used Wandering in the Wind and quickly retreated along the path of the chaotic air currents, leaving the range of the chaotic air current. "Big brother!" Huang Fu Kuang immediately shouted. Chu Mu nodded, barely resisting the weakness that came from inside out. He said a few words to Huang Fu Kuang, then returned to his own sword tower. He needed to rest and recover. The appearance of the spirit chi vortex would last for quite a long time. During this time, the people enveloped by the spirit chi vortex would completely transform their acquired sword chi into innate sword chi. Moreover, their bodies would be tempered, achieving the goal of being reborn. The attack released by condensing the sword aura on the sword has extremely strong condensing characteristics and power. Now that I've already grasped it, I'll give this sword a name. This sword was first released in the small sword pagoda, sinking into the blood purgatory. I believe that once the sword aura increases, the power of this sword will become more and more powerful. So, let's call it the prison-breaking sword. With my current essence, energy, and spirit, I can only use the prison-breaking sword once. The second time is too forceful. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I won't use it again. It took Chu Mu more than half a day to recover his essence, energy, and spirit. However, night fell, and he didn't go to the Holy Land of Cultivation until the next day to enter the Gold Sword Tomb. Huangfu Shenglong, Qin Shi, and Ouyang Qingye also spent more than half a day to complete the transformation of their acquired sword qi into innate sword qi. Moreover, they also underwent the tempering of being reborn. Later, Chu Mu heard that they were summoned by the principal, and then left the outer school for the inner school. Their departure didn't cause too much of a stir. For the outer school students, someone could break through to the Qi transformation realm at any time. Apart from the more talented students who were determined to comprehend 30% of the intent realm before breaking through, there were also some who felt that it was too difficult to comprehend 30% of the intent realm. They just tried their best to raise the intent realm to a certain level, then accumulate their own foundation, and then break through to the Qi transformation realm. In the blink of an eye, another 6 days passed. In the Gold Sword Tomb, Chu Mu was still practicing the gold-edge swordsmanship. Every move was at his fingertips, and the feeling of transcendence was getting stronger and stronger. It was as if in the next second, Chu Mu's gold-edge swordsmanship could surpass perfection and reach a higher level. 29% of the intent realm of metal practicing the gold-edge swordsmanship over and over again, the 10,000 swords around him resonated and danced, and there was also a sense of transcendence. All kinds of profound essence of the intent realm of metal emerged layer by layer in his mind, slowly flowing through his heart. He carefully pondered over it and deepened it. Suddenly, as if a thin layer of membrane had been pierced, Chu Mu's spirit trembled, and he unconsciously stopped practicing. His pupils turned into a pure pale gold, extremely sharp and penetrating into the void. 30% of the intent realm of metal, the 10,000 swords fell and returned to their original place. Chu Mu sheathed his sword, took out the sword token, and left the Gold Sword Tomb. "How come you came out today? You still have a lot of time left." The guardian elder of the Holy Land of Cultivation was puzzled. 30% of the intent realm. "I don't need to continue comprehending it," Chu Mu calmly replied. The guardian elder was stunned once again. After 3 breaths, he shook his head and bitterly smiled. "You always surprise and surprise me. Now that you have comprehended 30% of the 3 intents, and your sword Qi cultivation has also reached the peak of half-step Qi transformation realm. Prepare a little and you can break through to the Qi transformation realm. However, I have some advice for you. The moment you break through to the Qi transformation realm, you will enter a temporary state of being one with the world. Under this state, your comprehension will multiply, and there is a certain chance that you can successfully raise your intent realm from 30% to 40%. I believe that with your comprehension, you can achieve 100%. However, the duration of being one with the world is too short, so my advice is to choose one of the intents to break through. Only when you have the energy to do so can you break through to the second one. Don't bite off more than you can chew." "Many thanks, Elder." Chu Mu saluted with his sword. The elder nodded. After interacting with Chu Mu for a while, he clearly knew that Chu Mu was a very opinionated person. He would not easily accept the advice of others. "I'll take my leave first," Chu Mu said. "Okay. Oh right, you still have more than 100 Holy Land of Cultivation time left. You can transfer the remaining time," the elder said. Chu Mu's footsteps paused slightly. He nodded and continued walking towards the 5th sword tower. He had already made up his mind about the remaining time. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 203. 40% of the concept of wind. 30% of the concept of cloud. 30% of the concept of metal. Beginner level of sword force. These were the things that Chumu had with him. They were his true strength. Up until now, no one had been able to make him use all of his strength and trump cards. My sword chi cultivation is at the peak of the half-step chi transformation realm. I'm only a step away from the true chi transformation realm. However, I still need to make some preparations to ensure that when I break through, I can raise the concept of cloud and metal to 40%. It would be best if I could raise the concept of wind a bit as well. Chumu announced that he was going into seclusion and refused all interruptions. As a result, the people of the outer palace began to speculate. In the end, they all believed that not long after Huangfu Shenglong and the other two, another person was about to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Could it be that Chumu's concept has already reached 30%? Someone couldn't help but ask. Are you stupid? If it's not 30%, with Chumu's talent, would he be so reckless? Someone immediately said with disdain. You're the stupid one. How can you be so sure that Chumu is going into seclusion to break through to the Qi transformation realm? If I say you don't understand, then you don't understand. I'm too lazy to explain. I didn't think that the cold-faced man was already preparing to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Huang Fufian's small face was filled with contemplation. Soon after, she clapped her hand. No, this time I can't lose to him no matter what. I have to enter the Qi transformation realm before him. As she spoke, Huang Fufian also announced that she was going into seclusion. Big Brother and Little Swallow have already announced that they're going into seclusion. It seems that they're preparing to break through to the Qi transformation realm. My concept of power is not far from 30%. Then I'll also go into seclusion and focus on comprehending the concept of power. I'll try to reach 30% as soon as possible and then prepare to break through to the Qi transformation realm, Huang Fu Kuang muttered to himself. It was as if a new wave of cultivation craze had started, and seclusion was the trend. There was nothing special about Chu Mu's seclusion. Although his sword chi was already extremely pure, it still needed to be refined. At the same time, he also needed to adjust his mental state so that his essence, chi, and spirit could reach their peak. Only when everything was adjusted to its peak state would it be the best time to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Otherwise, if it was too early or too slow, it would have an impact. 2 days. Chumu only used 2 days to adjust his condition. His upper elemental sword chi was originally very pure, and it could be adjusted with a little bit of adjustment. Because of his unusually strong soul power, his essence, chi, and spirit could be adjusted very quickly, and his chi and blood were vigorous. It's time to break through to the Qi transformation stage, Chumu muttered to himself as he sat down on the second floor of the sword gauntlet and began channeling the Shangyuan sword chi art. Breaking through from the sword chi realm to the Qi transformation realm was a transition from the Hotian realm to the Xiantian realm. It was quite difficult. However, every swordsman had already experienced that feeling when they broke through to the 9th stage of the sword chi realm. It left a slight impression in their hearts and became an entry point for them to break through. The more talented a person was, the easier it was for them to find an entry point. Naturally, it would be easier for them to break through. For example, Chu Mu's 7th grade cultivation talent was very ordinary in the Sword Mansion. However, in other aspects, he was not ordinary at all. According to what Chu Mu had learned during this period of time, there were 2 ways to break through to the Qi transformation realm. The first way was to first transform one's Hotian sword chi into Xiantian sword chi, and then refine one's body to successfully break through to the Qi transformation realm. The second way was to first expel one's Hotian sword chi from one's body, and then use the external spiritual chi to refine one's body. After that, one would absorb the external spiritual chi into one's body and refine it into Xiantian sword chi. These two methods were not necessarily better or worse, but the order was different. However, the first method required a longer time, and it was steady and steady. The second method was more efficient, but it was best if one already had a streak of Xiantian sword chi in their dantian as a primer. Chu Mu had already made his choice after understanding this. The origin sword chi flowed rapidly in his meridians. When the speed of the sword chi reached a perfect balance, Chu Mu's mind flashed, and he subconsciously ejected the origin sword chi from his body. Whooshing sounds could be heard as streaks of white arrows shot out from Chu Mu's body in all directions. They were extremely fast, sharp, and ferocious. Chu Mu seemed to have turned into a hedgehog. These sword chi were all Hotian sword chi, and they dissipated into the air. Subsequently, Chu Mu used the method of controlling the sword chi to gather the surrounding spiritual chi, and began to nourish and refine his body. External sword aura originally had the effect of nourishing the body. Although the effects weren't immediate, it was long-lasting and gentle. It was like the silent spring rain that moistened everything. At this moment, Chu Mu's body was even purer than other half-step chi transformation peak swordsmen. Spiritual chi flowed slowly in his body, and a mixture of black and scarlet filth was expelled little by little from his pores. A foul stench immediately filled the air. In a mere 6 hours, Chu Mu had completed the steps of refining his body with spiritual chi. After refining his body, regardless of whether it was strength, reaction, or explosive power, they all had obvious improvements. The toughness of his meridians had also increased by a lot, and they were now able to withstand the impact of Xiantian sword chi. With a thought, the only Xiantian sword chi hidden in his dantian immediately flowed out of his dantian and circulated in his meridians. His meridians did not feel the slightest bit of pain. In a split second, the spiritual chi of the outside world surged in from every pore on Chu Mu's body. All the spiritual chi within the sword gauntlet was immediately gathered, and the spiritual chi outside the sword gauntlet also surged rapidly, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea. Very quickly, an unceasingly spinning cyclone appeared in the sky above the fifth sword gauntlet, crazily absorbing the spiritual chi flowing in from all directions. The cyclone's range grew larger and larger, and its color became darker and denser. That's the fifth sword gauntlet, the sword gauntlet Chu Mu lives in. Is he also about to break through to the chi transformation realm? For a moment, the entire outer house was once again alarmed. A large number of students left their sword gauntlets and gathered a few hundred meters away from the fifth sword gauntlet, staring at the cyclone above the fifth sword gauntlet. What a huge cyclone! It looks like it's at least 40 meters. It's indeed huge, but it's still not as big as Huangfu Shenglong and the other two. Whether it's comparable or not, we'll know in the end. Look, that cyclone is rapidly growing. The airflow turned into a wind, blowing everyone's black hair and clothes into a mess. They all narrowed their eyes and stared at the cyclone above the sword gauntlet that was gradually condensing into a spiritual chi vortex. It's already 50 meters. It's not inferior to any of Huangfu Shenglong and the other two. It seems to be still expanding. In the past 100 years, when the outer house students broke through to the chi transformation realm, the largest spiritual chi vortex was 70 meters. I wonder how many meters Chu Mu's spiritual chi vortex can grow to? I wonder if Chu Mu can break another record and create a new one. Therefore, many students were looking forward to it. This cold-faced man actually broke it earlier than me. In the fourth sword gauntlet, Huangfu Fian had an unhappy expression and clenched her fists in indignation. Big Brother is about to break through to the chi transformation realm. Judging from the momentum, he's not inferior to Big Brother Shenglong, Huangfu Kuang said inwardly. The spiritual chi vortex continued to expand 60 meters. Under everyone's gazes, the spiritual chi vortex expanded to 70 meters. The violent wind blew, forcing the students who were a few hundred meters away from the fifth sword gauntlet to retreat another 200 meters. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stand firm. 70 meters! Chu Mu has already tied the highest record in the past 100 years. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Why do I feel that the whirlpool of spiritual energy is still expanding? Someone rubbed his eyes with all his strength, causing them to turn red as he spoke with a face full of astonishment. No, it's not your eyes playing tricks on you. The spiritual chi vortex is still expanding. Is Chu Mu going to create a new record? Everyone was extremely excited and looking forward to it. Their breathing became hurried and their faces flushed red. 80 meters. The spiritual chi vortex was still expanding. 90 meters. The spiritual chi vortex paused for a moment before expanding again. However, the speed of expansion was getting slower and slower like a snail. 90 meters. The person who spoke was stuttering and his voice was constantly trembling. Rumbling sounds continued to shake the surroundings. The terrifying storm had already covered a kilometer around the fifth sword gauntlet. Everyone had no choice but to retreat a kilometer away. The sword gauntlet was in the center of the storm, making people very worried that it would be swept away. However, the seal displayed an extremely powerful force and forcibly blocked the storm that was terrifying enough to kill an ordinary chi transformation realm swordsman. It didn't budge at all. The spiritual chi vortex had a whirlpool that poured into the sword gauntlet like a cone. As the spiritual chi vortex spun crazily, the purest part of the spiritual chi was rapidly condensed and poured into the sword gauntlet along the cone, where it was absorbed by Chu Mu. With a strand of Xiantian sword chi as a guide, Chu Mu quickly absorbed the pure spiritual chi that filled the entire sword gauntlet. The spiritual chi was quickly converted into Xiantian sword chi in his meridians, causing the Xiantian sword chi to become more and more vigorous. Time slowly passed. The spiritual chi vortex had expanded to 100 meters in size and completely stabilized. As if the end of the world had arrived, the spiritual chi in the entire outer palace became turbulent and turned into gusts of wind that blew over. No matter where one was in the outer palace, one could clearly see the huge spiritual chi vortex in the sky with just a slight raise of their head. The entire spiritual chi vortex was a dense grayish-white color, as if it was spinning the entire sky. 100 meters. Under the gale, even the sound changed. For a moment, the people who stared at the huge spiritual chi vortex couldn't tell what they were feeling. Excitement? Anticipation? Envy? Excitement? Or bitterness? Disappointment? In short, they felt as if they had flipped open a bottle of 5 different flavors. It was abnormally complicated. The sky became darker and darker. It was as heavy and oppressive as the storm before it arrived. It was almost suffocating. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 204. Spiritual chi that was as pure as a low-grade spirit stone continuously poured down from the top of the sword gauntlet, filling up the sword gauntlet and turning it into a sea of pure spiritual chi. Chu Mu, who was in the middle of the sea of spiritual chi, did not need to actively absorb it. The innate sword chi in his meridians grew stronger and stronger, naturally producing a strong suction force that sucked the surrounding spiritual chi into his body and quickly turned it into innate sword chi. Compared to Hotian's sword aura, Xiantian's sword aura was 10 times purer. Therefore, even if a large amount of pure spirit aura was absorbed and rapidly converted into Chu Mu's body, it was still unable to fill up Xiantian's sword aura in a short period of time. Pure spiritual chi poured into Chu Mu's body continuously. Other than being turned into innate sword chi, it was also constantly nourishing his body. In this situation, Chu Mu's mind was gradually emptied. His soul power seemed to be unconsciously radiating out, diffusing around his body and into the air, gradually forming a connection with the outside world. Even though Chu Mu's soul strength was several times stronger than normal people's, it still gave him a monstrous level of comprehension and an even more resilient mental strength. But other than that, Chu Mu had never used the so-called soul power. The soul power that was several times stronger than ordinary swordsmen had never been used in any other way. It was not that Chu Mu was unwilling, but that he did not know how to. The soul belonged to an incomparably mysterious domain. He could only feel that his soul was far stronger than ordinary people, but he could not feel how much stronger his soul was, let alone use it. But at this moment, Chu Mu's soul power radiated out from the depths of his mind, spreading out bit by bit. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. When it reached 6 meters, the radiating soul power stopped, as if it had reached its limit. Then, Chu Mu felt his soul shake, as if there was a pure energy pouring into his soul from nothingness. His soul became stronger and more solid, and the radiating soul power spread out again. 7 meters, 8 meters, 9 meters, 10 meters. When the soul energy's radiation reached 10 meters, Chu Mu completely entered the ethereal state, the rare state of being one with the world. In this state, Chu Mu suddenly recovered a small part of his consciousness from his unconscious state. He felt that his thoughts were unprecedentedly clear, like a perfect diamond without all the dust, flawless and flawless. At a glance, he could see through everything, straight to the essence. Chu Mu controlled a small part of his consciousness, and all kinds of understandings of the concept of clouds immediately rushed into his mind. Clouds gathered and dispersed impermanently, changing irregularly, rolling and unrolling at the same time. They were both comfortable and leisurely. Therefore, there was a saying that they had no intention of leaving or staying, drifting with the clouds beyond the heavens. Yi Chen began to deepen his comprehension of the 30% concept of cloud. All kinds of mysteries appeared in his mind. Chu Mu's pupils were like two white clouds rotating. The whites of his eyes seemed to have turned into a sea of clouds. White clouds appeared and quickly floated by. Gathering and dispersing, impermanence and indefinite. The pure spiritual qi that had gathered around him was suddenly affected as well. It became like clouds that gathered and dispersed irregularly, fluctuating unpredictably. 31%. 32%. Like riding on a rocket, the comprehension of the concept of clouds increased rapidly, which was extremely shocking. Not long after, the concept of clouds successfully increased to 40%. At this point, Chu Mu only felt that all kinds of understandings of the concept of clouds became obscure and difficult. He knew that this was his current limit. Even if he spent the rest of his time on it, he would not be able to make any progress. The concept of clouds retracted, and the airflow returned to normal. The concept of gold appeared again. In a split second, the airflow formed by the pure spiritual qi changed again. Each of them became incomparably sharp, like sharp and cold swords, shooting towards Chu Mu. They seemed to want to pierce through Chu Mu and kill him with 10,000 swords. All kinds of mysteries of the concept of gold appeared in his mind again, like a surging tide. Jin Jiqiang's sharpness was incomparably sharp. It was incomparably swift and fierce, able to cut through all things and penetrate everything. Chu Mu's pupils became a pale gold color. Faintly, there seemed to be two small golden swords flickering within. The whites of his eyes were also suffused with a faint golden stream of air, causing his eyes to be incomparably sharp. Normal people would feel as if their eyes were being attacked by a sword ray, unable to withstand it. The concept of gold began to increase. 31%, 32%, 33% compared to the speed of the concept of clouds. The concept of gold was not inferior. 40%. When the concept of gold increased to 40%, Chu Mu once again felt that the comprehension of the concept of gold had become incomparably difficult and obscure. He was already powerless to continue. However, the ethereal realm of unity of heaven and man was not over yet. With a flash of inspiration, Chu Mu locked onto the sword aura. Sword aura was the embodiment of the swordsman's sharpness. Essence, chi, and spirit merged into one, condensing into a sword. Comprehend the swordsman's belief and sword spirit. Combine the belief and sword spirit of the swordsman with one's own essence, chi, and spirit, and finally condense into one, forming the sword aura. With the sword aura on the body, the sharpness was endless. Facing all kinds of pressure and all kinds of negative emotions, one could resist them. Chu Mu's sword aura was at the entry level. But recently, when he studied how to gather the sword aura on the sword and transform it into an attack, his comprehension of the sword aura deepened by a lot. At this moment, under the ethereal realm of unity of heaven and man, his comprehension of the sword aura gushed out like a flood. The spiritual chi that was madly converging became overbearing and dense, like a towering mountain. It also contained boundless sharpness, as if it was capable of shattering and slicing through everything. It was even more boundless and powerful than before, and it was not in any way inferior to the Sword Pavilion Elder of the Azure Edge Sword sect. Unknowingly, Chu Mu's sword aura had a breakthrough, from the entry level to the small success level, and its power had multiplied. His mind shook, and the radiating soul energy quickly retreating into the depths of his soul. Chu Mu's body swayed, and he retreated from the ethereal realm of unity of heaven and man. The Xiantian sword chi in his body had also accumulated to the maximum, reaching a saturated state. Chu Mu had officially stepped into a new realm of swordsman, chi transformation realm. My soul has actually become even stronger. Chu Mu carefully sensed that his soul was now much stronger than before. The essence of cloud and essence of gold have both increased to 40%, which is expected. What is unexpected is that the sword aura has also increased from the entry level to the small success level, which is an unexpected surprise. He muttered to himself, "Now, if I use the prison-breaking sword, its power will definitely be 2 or 3 times stronger than before, maybe even more." Taking a deep breath, the slowly dissipating spirit chi entered his nose, making Chu Mu feel very comfortable. His whole body was warm and full of vitality. This feeling was very wonderful, and Chu Mu was addicted to it. The violent wind outside the sword tower also gradually became gentle, and the range became smaller and smaller. The huge spirit chi whirlpool above the sword tower was slowly dissipating, and finally disappeared. Everything returned to its initial tranquility, as if nothing had happened. However, everyone who was watching knew what had happened. They had witnessed the birth of another record, and perhaps this was the beginning of a legend. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 205. Cool and clear water poured down from the top, splashing countless water droplets. Chu Mu was 18 years old this year, with a height of 1 meter and 70 centimeters. Because of his cultivation, his muscles were defined but not hard, giving off a soft and tenacious beauty. His skin was smooth and white, making many girls envious. The cool water quickly slid down his body, unable to stay on his smooth skin. Under his skin, there seemed to be a faint jade-like luster flowing slowly. Every movement of his revealed a sense of power, completely different from before. When I broke through to the chi transformation realm, I used my spirit chi to refine my body, causing my body to be reborn. It really feels different, full of vitality. Chu Mu thought to himself as he washed himself. Unfortunately, for some reason, when I broke through, the external sword chi and internal sword chi merged into one, turning into innate sword chi. Since then, I no longer have the distinction between the internal and external sword chi, which has undoubtedly caused me to lose one of my trump cards. But fortunately, I have also gained a new ability, which can be used as a less important trump card. After washing himself, Chu-mu picked up a towel to wipe off the water droplets on his body, and put on a clean blue robe. This robe was worn by the inner disciples of the Azure Edge Sword sect. Chu-mu had a few of them, and besides the damaged one, he had been changing the others. Now that I have reached the Qi transformation realm, I am qualified to become an inner disciple. In the future, I will need more advanced sword Qi arts, and also a real sword to bring out the true power of the Qi transformation realm. At this time, the seal outside the sword tower was triggered. Chu-mu walked down the tower and saw a person outside. It was a deacon of the 100 Affair Hall. "Chu-mu, the palace master wants to see you," the deacon said directly. "Okay." Chu-mu walked out of the seal and followed the deacon. Under the guidance of the deacon, they came to a sword tower that was obviously different from the others. "The manor lord is inside the sword tower. Come with me," the deacon said. The deacon seemed to have a sword token that corresponded to the seal of the sword tower. He opened an entrance and let Chu-mu in. "Manor Lord, Chu-mu is here." Standing at the entrance of the sword tower, the deacon lowered his head slightly and announced loudly, "Come in." A dignified voice came from inside. "Chu-mu, you can go in. My mission is complete." The deacon smiled. "Thank you for your trouble." Chu-mu nodded his head and exhaled lightly. He strode into the sword tower. The area of the first floor of the sword tower was obviously a few times larger than that of the No. 5 sword tower, and its height was also twice as high. Chu-mu was slightly stunned. "I'm upstairs." The authoritative voice came again. Chu-mu walked up the stairs to the second floor. The area of the second floor was also a few times larger than that of the number 5 sword tower. The light was dim, but it didn't affect Chu-mu's vision. The decorations were very simple, and it was obvious that the manor lord wasn't someone who loved to enjoy life. Chu-mu's gaze was attracted by a back view. The back view was on the balcony, looking at the sky with his hands behind his back. The figure wasn't very tall, but it gave Chu-mu a sense of majesty, as if he was looking up at a tall mountain. At the same time, he didn't give Chu-mu any pressure. "Chu-mu, you, who came from a low-grade sword sect, have brought me too many surprises," the owner of the back view said slowly. His voice was somewhat dignified and had a unique rhythm. In an instant, he grabbed Chu-mu's full attention to listen to his words. "You killed your way through the 3 stages of the natural barrier, ranked in the top 3 with your 10th phase peak sword Qi cultivation, and even obtained first place in the Savage Bee Forest. You have displayed extraordinary sword skills." Chu-mu didn't say anything. These weren't secrets. As long as he was willing, he could ask, let alone the outer manor lord. "You once again created a miracle by participating in the small sword pagoda ranking battle. You were ranked 65th on the steel sword ranking battle. You were ranked 5th in the second small sword pagoda ranking battle. You were ranked 1st in the third small sword pagoda ranking battle. You even persisted for 100 incense sticks, creating a record that has never been seen in 100 years. It hasn't even been seen in 100 years. The manor lord continued, "You comprehended the dual concepts of wind and cloud, and when you finally broke through to the Qi transformation realm, you triggered a 100-meter spirit Qi whirlpool, creating a new record. You have truly surprised me." Soon after, the manor lord turned around. In an instant, Chu-mu felt a light spread out. The darkness in the sword tower seemed to be swallowed up, and the entire tower was shining. Chu-mu discovered that the manor lord's appearance was very ordinary. There wasn't anything special about him, but his eyes were very deep, like a vast ocean. They were unfathomable, as if they could contain everything. "Manor lord." Chu-mu saluted with his sword. "I'm very simple here. I hope you don't mind." The manor lord smiled gently, and his attitude was very kind. "I summoned you for 2 reasons. The first is because I'm very curious. You really shocked me. The second is because I have a necessary itinerary." Every outer house student who breaks through to the Qi transformation realm is summoned by me. I will inform them of the relevant matters of the inner house and have them brought to the inner house. Then, Manor Lord, do you think I'm very ordinary when you see me now? Chumu asked with a slight smile. No. The Manor Lord shook his head slightly, but did not continue the topic. How much do you know about the inner house? Not much, Chumu replied. Very well, I will now explain to you the relevant matters of the inner house. This is something you should know. As for the rest, you can ask me. If I can answer you, I will naturally answer you, the Manor Lord said concisely. All right. Chumu nodded. The inner house students are all at the Qi transformation realm. Once an outer house student breaks through to the Qi transformation realm, he is qualified to become an inner house student. However, he still needs to pass an examination. The Manor Lord spoke frankly. This examination is very simple. As long as your sword Qi cultivation has reached the Qi transformation realm, there is basically no difficulty. Therefore, you don't have to worry about it. Chumu nodded. He originally thought that the so-called examination would be difficult, but after hearing the Manor Lord's words, it seemed that it was just a formality. After becoming an inner house student, you will be able to obtain the cultivation method of a low profound level sword Qi art. However, this low profound level sword Qi art is very ordinary. If you want to cultivate a more profound sword Qi art, you will need to choose from the Hidden Arts Pavilion and exchange for it with academic credit. Here, I'll give you a suggestion. You'd rather spend a little more time to obtain academic credits and exchange them for a better sword Qi technique than cultivate an ordinary low-grade, profound rank sword Qi technique. Because the difficulty of cultivating a profound rank sword Qi technique is extremely great, and it consumes an extremely long amount of time. However, it still depends on the person. In addition, after becoming an inner house student, you will have a chance to choose whether or not to challenge. Challenge. Chumu's eyes flashed with a hint of curiosity. The challenges are arranged randomly. In other words, you will not be able to know the content of the challenge in advance. You will only receive a notification the day after you choose to challenge. If you pass the challenge, you will receive an additional reward, usually a low-level sword. If you fail the challenge, you will fail and will not receive any additional reward. The Manor Lord continued. Chumu suddenly understood. The challenges are arranged randomly. Aren't you worried that there will be challenges that I can't handle? Chumu thought for a moment and asked. Although the challenges are arranged randomly, the difficulty is within an acceptable range. I suggest that you choose to challenge. If you fail, you will not lose anything. If you pass, you will receive a low-level sword, which will increase your strength by a lot. Chumu nodded. In addition, there are a total of more than 70,000 students in the inner house. Every student has their own sword tower. In order to make it easier to manage and increase competition, the inner house is divided into 10 academies. When you apply to become an inner house student, you must choose one of the academies and become a member. In the past, whenever an outstanding student appeared, it would always lead to competition between the 10 academies, and even large fights would break out. There was once a large-scale conflict that resulted in many deaths, and the master of the Sword Palace was furious, so he issued a new order. The 10 academies are no longer allowed to compete for students, and students are free to choose which academy they want to join. The 10 academies are not allowed to interfere. Otherwise, I believe that with your talent, you will definitely be valued and will be able to obtain better techniques and sword. I prefer to obtain them myself, Chumu said indifferently. To be honest, there are strong and weak academies in the 10 academies. The top 3 academies are the first, second, and third academies. Because Huangfu Huangtian came from the first academy, Chunbuer came from the second academy, and Shangguan Qinin came from the third academy, many talented students joined the 3 academies because of their fame. Thus, the overall strength of the 3 academies is greater than that of the other 6 academies. The Manor Lord nodded and said, "By the way, the Sword House has 3 Sons of Swords." "Manor Lord, I've heard about this before," Chumu said. "All right, since you've heard about it, it'll be easier for me to explain." The Manor Lord chuckled. The students of the first 3 academies are basically all from the Heavenly King Palace, the Sword Pavilion, and the Heavenly Music Pavilion. Otherwise, you'll be ostracized by them. If you want to join the first 3 academies, you'll most likely have to join one of these organizations. The other 7 academies are more relaxed. If you don't want to join any organization, you can choose one of the 7 back academies. Although it's not as good as the first 3 academies, as long as you stand out enough, you'll be valued and receive more resources. We swordsmen train ourselves and go against the flow. Even if we're in a difficult situation, we have to maintain a motivated heart. A swordsman's edge. Chumu nodded. That's right. A swordsman should have an edge. If a swordsman loses his edge, he won't be able to improve anymore. Instead of relying on others' charity, it's better to fight for it with the sword in your hand and train yourself. The Manor Lord nodded vigorously. Obviously, he was very much in favor of using the sword in one's hand to fight for resources and open up a path for oneself. This point was also very much in line with Chu Mu's point of view. After the conversation and the Manor Lord's explanation of the outer mansion, Chu Mu had a clearer understanding of the inner mansion. "All right, I've already told you what you should know. As for the rest, you'll have to wait until you enter the inner mansion before you slowly experience it." The Manor Lord finally said, "I'll give you 1 day to prepare. At this time tomorrow, come to me and I'll personally take you to the inner mansion. I'll take my leave first." After the sword salute, Chu Mu excused himself and left the sword tower under the gaze of the Manor Lord. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 206. Red-Crowned Crane was a low-level monster trained by the Great Kuan Sword Mansion. Although it had the strength of a Chi transformation realm, it was gentle and did not attack unless it was provoked. The purpose of the Sword Mansion to train red-crowned cranes was to use them as mounts. Among all the low-level monsters, red-crowned cranes were the easiest to train. Moreover, they had a strong ability to carry weight and had great endurance. They also flew quickly and steadily. The outer mansion master rode one red-crowned crane, while Chu Mu rode the other. They soared into the sky and flew into the distance. Their destination was the inner mansion of the Great Kuan Sword Mansion. The Great Kuan Sword Mansion was located in the Great Kuan Void Boundary and was independent of the outside world. However, the inner mansion and the outer mansion were not in the same place. The outer mansion was not far from the entrance of the Great Kuan Void Boundary, while the inner mansion was far away from the outer mansion. It was like the difference between the mortal world and the deep mountains and forests. Don't be too surprised when you reach the inner mansion. The outer mansion master's voice ignored the strong wind that was blowing and directly entered Chu Mu's ears. Chu Mu did not reply, but his curiosity was piqued. The Great Kuan Sword Mansion was established by the Great Kuan royal family. It included many disciples of the royal family and many outstanding disciples from various sword sections. It could be said to be the most powerful place in the entire Great Kuan dynasty. Just the inner mansion alone had more than 70,000 students. From this, it could be seen that the inner mansion was the true foundation of the Great Kuan Sword Mansion. As for the outer mansion, it could only be considered a front station. It was like a reserve force in the army. What was the difference between the inner mansion and the outer mansion other than the difference in cultivation and number of students? The red-crowned cranes flapped their wings and quickly left the outer mansion. They turned into two small dots and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Junior brother, I will make good use of the time you gave me. I will try to comprehend the essence and improve it to the maximum." Luo Yufeng looked up at the cloudless sky and clenched his fists as he said to himself. Chu Mu transferred the remaining usage time of more than 100 cultivation holy lands to Luo Yufeng. Originally, Luo Yufeng could only enjoy 8 hours of time to enter the cultivation holy land every 3 months. The effect of his comprehension was not obvious. After half a year, he had only touched the surface of the concept. However, he believed that with the 100-plus hours that Chu Mu had given him, not only would he be able to successfully comprehend a concept, but he would also be able to raise his concept to 10% or even higher. In this way, his overall strength would improve again. Perhaps one day, he would be able to break into the top 100 of the Iron Sword list. Through his own efforts, he would be able to obtain more time to cultivate in the Holy Land. After crossing a tall mountain, Chu Mu's eyes suddenly widened. Looking down, he saw a vast group of sword towers densely covering the earth. This kind of feeling was like the first time he sat in a helicopter and flew over a bustling city. That kind of feeling was shocking. It was huge, extremely huge. There were so many sword towers that it was impossible to count how many of them there were. One could only tell that there were big and small sword towers, high and low sword towers. That was all. Just this alone was enough to make Chu Mu gasp in amazement. There are a total of 100,000 sword towers in the inner mansion. The voice of the outer mansion master sounded in his ears again. Students who come to the inner mansion for the first time will be shocked by the scene in front of them. After becoming a student of the inner mansion, each of you will have an independent sword tower to live in. However, the sword towers in the inner mansion are divided into 4 levels, from highest to lowest. They are heaven, earth, black, and yellow. Heaven, earth, black, and yellow? What's the difference between the different levels of the sword towers? Chu Mu asked. His voice was condensed in the sword chi. It tore through the violent wind and directly entered the ears of the outer mansion master. Of course there are differences. Where there are people, there will be competition. Only with competition can there be improvement. In order to make the competition between the students more intense, the Sword Mansion has specially divided the sword towers of the inner mansion and the King's Mansion into different levels. The outer mansion master explained. Chi transformation realm cultivators can communicate with the outside world and absorb the surrounding spiritual chi into their body to refine and improve their Xiantian sword chi cultivation. Therefore, every sword tower has a spirit gathering array and spirit tempering array, which can absorb the spiritual chi from outside the sword tower and refine it inside the sword tower, making it purer and easier to absorb and refine. The spirit chi inside the yellow-grade sword tower is 50% more than the spirit chi outside the sword tower. The purity of the spirit chi also surpasses 50%. The profound grade sword tower is 100%, the earth grade sword tower is 150%, and the heaven grade sword tower is 20%. Chu Mu's eyes flashed. The sword towers in the outer mansion probably also had the so-called spirit gathering array, but for sword chi transformation realm cultivators, it only had the effect of nourishing their body for a long time. For chi transformation realm cultivators, not only could the spiritual chi nourish their body, they could also directly absorb it and transform it into Xiantian sword chi to improve their cultivation. The benefits were many times greater. The difference between 1 time and 1.5 times was not simple. It was like the difference between 2 years of cultivation and 3 years of cultivation. 1 year's time could often increase the distance by quite a lot. Of course, students who have just entered the inner mansion can only stay in the yellow sword tower. There is only one way to stay in a higher level sword tower. The outer mansion master paused for a moment, then said with a sharp tone, "With the sword in your hand, you have to challenge and defeat opponents one after another. In the end, you will have the right to stay in the Heaven Sword Tower." Although the outer mansion master's words made one's blood boil, Chu Mu was still able to maintain his composure. "Are there any restrictions?" "Yes, of course there are. If you want to challenge the right to stay in a higher-level sword tower, you have to go up step by step. First, you have to apply to the 100 Affair Hall for a deacon to be the witness and challenge a student of the same level. If you win 10 times in a row within a month, you will have the right to challenge a student one level higher than you. If you defeat the opponent, you will have the right to stay in the opponent's sword tower and can continue to challenge. If you lose, you will not have the right to challenge for 3 months. The Outer Mansion Master's tone became gentle again as he said. The red-crowned cranes flew down, and countless sword towers quickly enlarged in front of their eyes. Soon, the red-crowned cranes landed in front of the Flying Cranes Tower. The Flying Cranes Tower was a sword palace organization that specialized in taming the red-crowned cranes. Led by the Outer Mansion Master, they passed through countless sword towers and quickly headed towards the 100 Affair Hall. With the Outer Mansion Master's help, the process of reaching the 100 Affair Hall was exceptionally smooth. The so-called test consisted of 2 tests. The first test was to see if his dantian was filled with innate sword chi. The test tool was a specially made crystal ball. The deacon asked Chu Mu to place his palm on it and circulate his innate sword chi. The crystal ball immediately emitted a pure red luster. The deacon stared at it carefully for a while, then nodded and said that it was a pass. If there were impurities in the red luster, it meant that the innate sword chi was not pure enough. It could also be caused by the acquired sword chi or other factors. This would affect the swordsman's future cultivation and improvement. The second test was to see if the swordsman's control of the innate sword chi was good enough. The most direct method was to use the innate sword chi to release a sword chi slash to attack the test wall. Chu Mu unsheathed his sword and slashed out without any pretense. The innate sword chi surged and gathered, leaving the sword blade and forming an arc. It directly slashed at a specially made black wall 10 meters away. With a bang, the innate sword chi slash shattered, and the black wall flashed with a red luster. And not bad. Your attacks are clean and efficient, and your sword chi is flowing smoothly. Your attack power is also up to standard. The deacon nodded with a faint look of admiration on his face. You have passed both tests. Congratulations, you have become a member of the Inner Mansion. Now give me your identity sword token. Chu Mu took out his identity sword token and handed it to the deacon. The Outer Mansion Master stood to the side and watched without saying a word. Chu Mu's identity sword token was also changed. His internal information was changed from Outer Mansion Disciple to Inner Mansion Disciple. However, when the deacon in charge saw that Chu Mu had more than 20,000 academic credits left in his sword token, he was shocked. This was because he rarely met a new Inner Mansion Disciple who had more than 20,000 academic credits in his sword token. Such people would usually become famous in the Inner Mansion and were not ordinary people. The newest batch of new students to enter the Outer Mansion. It seems that you have obtained a very high ranking in the 3 natural barriers, the deacon said with a smile as he handed the identity sword token back to Chu Mu. His attitude was much gentler than before. Chu Mu's talent is not bad, the Outer Mansion Master said. A student that you have personally brought here is naturally extraordinary. The Outer Mansion Master's cultivation and status were above the deacon's, so his tone was very respectful. He then looked at Chu Mu. With your ability, you should receive better training. I suggest that you choose between Astral 1, Astral 2, or Astral 3 to join the Heavenly King Palace, the Sword Pavilion, or the Heavenly Music Pavilion. If you stand out, you will definitely be valued and receive more resources for training. If you are willing, I can recommend you to join the Heavenly King Palace. You will immediately enter the eyes of the higher-ups there. Don't interfere with him, the Outer Mansion Master said calmly. He knew that this was a very normal situation. Once an outstanding student entered the Inner Mansion, the deacons would be the first to interact with them. Although the competition between the 10 academies was now prohibited, some small tricks were still allowed. For example, if Chu Mu accepted the deacon's recommendation to join the Heavenly King Palace, then Chu Mu would be recognized as someone worthy of training after passing the Heavenly King Palace's test. The deacon would also receive a reward from the Heavenly King Palace. Yes, I'm just giving you a suggestion, the deacon said. Thank you for your kindness, but I choose Astral 9, Chu Mu said. Zhuge Ming was in Astral 9, so Chu Mu subconsciously thought of Astral 9. Also, I choose a challenge, Chu Mu added. A challenge? The deacon was stunned for a moment before saying, Oh, you want a challenge? I understand. Go to Astral 9's Hall of 100 Affairs first. I'll make arrangements for the challenge and inform you tomorrow. Let's go, I'll take you to Astral 9. The outer mansion master did not interfere with Chu Mu's choice. Chu Mu, I have to report this matter to the higher-ups. Perhaps on this challenge, I can. The attendant watched Chu Mu's departing figure and a strange light revolved in his eyes as he quietly spoke. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 207. Chu Mu, top 3 in the 3 natural barriers, persisted for 100 incense sticks in the 3rd ranking battle of the Small Sword Pagoda, and had a spirit energy vortex of 100 meters when he broke through. All of these points show that he is not an ordinary genius and is worthy of being recruited by the Heavenly Emperor Palace. However, it is not that easy to gain the attention of the Heavenly Emperor Palace. Since he wants to challenge them, arrange a good opponent for him to enter the Heavenly Emperor Palace. Yes. There were more than 7,000 students in Astral 9, which meant that there were more than 7,000 Qi Transformation Realm swordsmen. Each of them was powerful. Now, Chu Mu had become one of the 7,000 or so. The 7,823rd tower was a yellow-ranked tower, and it was also the tower that Chu Mu had been assigned to. This tower was 50% larger than the 5th tower that he had previously lived in, but it also had 2 floors. Chu Mu sat on a cushion on the 2nd floor of the tower, carefully reading a book in his hand. 3 levels of primal Qi was a low-grade black-ranked sword Qi technique that had 3 levels. It was the normal innate sword Qi technique that Chu Mu had received when he had arrived at the Hall of 100 Affairs of Astral 9. The Hall of 100 Affairs had prepared sword Qi techniques of the same level but different type. They would be given a copy based on the student's choice, and it was up to the student to decide whether or not they wanted to practice it. Some students had higher standards and looked down on this kind of ordinary sword Qi art. They would often go to the scripture pavilion to exchange their credits for a better sword Qi art. Almost everyone wanted to do so, but in the end, most of them had no choice but to cultivate the ordinary mystic-level low-grade sword Qi art that was given for free. Chu Mu did not plan to practice it. He just wanted to see what was the difference between the low-grade black-ranked sword Qi technique and the yellow-ranked sword Qi technique. The low-grade black-ranked sword Qi technique started at the Qi transformation realm, and the sword Qi that was cultivated was the innate sword Qi. However, different grades of sword Qi techniques would result in different innate sword Qi. Although it's better than the Shangyuan sword Qi technique, it's still inferior to the dark blood sword Qi technique. Furthermore, it's several times harder to advance to the Xian sword Qi technique than the Huang level. Chu Mu's brows furrowed slightly. He closed the book and put it aside. Find some time to go to the Hidden Art Pavilion and see if there are any techniques that I'm satisfied with. The seal of the sword gauntlet was triggered. Chu Mu went downstairs and saw a man standing outside the seal of the sword gauntlet. The attire he was wearing indicated that he was from the Hall of 100 Things. Chu Mu, I'm here to inform you that the challenge you applied for has been confirmed. Tomorrow, you'll be fighting Meng Chao at the 100th arena, the person from 100 Affairs Hall said directly. All right. Chu Mu nodded. The deacon looked at Chu Mu, and his lips moved slightly as if he wanted to say something. However, he stopped himself and turned to leave. Chu Mu didn't mind and returned to the 2nd floor of the sword tower. A challenge tomorrow. Very efficient. Chu Mu sat down cross-legged. I wonder how strong Meng Chao is? I won't be going to the Hidden Art Pavilion for now. I'll adjust my body for tomorrow's battle. In a Huang-level sword tower in Astral 9. They actually want me to fight a new student. Meng Chao stood at the window and looked outside. He muttered to himself, a new student's cultivation is at most at the initial stage of the Qi transformation realm. However, I've already reached the initial stage of the Qi transformation realm. Even though I'm cultivating the normal Xian sword Qi technique that's given to me for free, I've already reached the last level. As he spoke, a hint of joy appeared on his face. As long as I defeat this person, I'll be able to join the Heavenly King Hall and become a member. I'll also be able to receive rewards. Who knows, I might even be able to get the sword Qi technique that I want. Chu Mu, tomorrow you'll become my stepping stone. It was not a rare thing for a new student to choose a challenge. Therefore, when the news spread, it did not cause much of a reaction. Only a small number of people showed interest in it. Although they were interested, they only knew that it was a new student and did not know his name. Most people did not pay much attention to it. A day passed quickly, and Chu Mu finished adjusting. His body was filled with Xiantian sword Qi, and his spirit was at its peak. He left the sword tower and prepared to head to arena number 100. Astral 9 was very large, and there were more than 7,000 students. Battles often broke out, and in order to deal with such situations, the Sword Manor had specially built 100 arenas in each academy. However, as a new student, Chu Mu wasn't familiar with Astral 9, so he didn't know where arena number 100 was. As Chu Mu was thinking, someone passed by him, so Chu Mu asked casually, "May I ask where arena number 100 is? Are you also going to watch the new student challenge Meng Chao?" The person stopped and turned around to look at Chu Mu. His thick eyebrows and large eyes gave him a forthright feeling. Yes. Chu Mu nodded, but he didn't say that he was the new student. The person didn't suspect anything. Although he had never seen Chu Mu before, there were more than 8,000 students in Astral 9. Aside from those who were somewhat famous, there were also some who weren't well known. Perfect, I'm going to watch as well. Come with me. The person suddenly laughed. I'm Liang Haishan. What's your name? Chu Mu. Chu Mu faintly smiled and said. Liang Haishan looked at Chu Mu carefully and sensed the fluctuations of Xiantian sword Qi on Chu Mu. Based on your cultivation, you should be a new student as well, right? Yes. Chu Mu nodded. Then do you know how strong the person challenging Meng Chao is? Liang Haishan asked. His strength should be all right, Chu Mu replied. Liang Haishan led the way, and the two of them quickly made their way to the 100th arena. You new students have only just broken through to the Qi transformation realm. You haven't even cultivated a profound level sword Qi technique yet, so your Xiantian sword Qi isn't thick enough and pure enough. Liang Haishan expressed his opinion. I know Meng Chao. He recently broke through to the Qi transformation realm, and although the sword Qi technique he's cultivating is a free, low-grade profound-level sword Qi technique, it's said that he's already cultivated it to the 3rd level. He's also comprehended about 30% of the concept of fire, which is approaching 40%. He's also mastered a supreme fire-type sword technique. Although I don't know how far he's cultivated it, he's definitely not weak. In my opinion, there's no doubt that the new student will win. Chu Mu didn't say anything and just listened carefully. Don't you think it's strange? Normally, this kind of challenge shouldn't have such a huge disparity in strength. Why is it like this time? Did the people from the Hall of 100 Affairs make a mistake? Liang Haishan seemed to be talking to Chu Mu, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Chu Mu didn't know either. All he needed to do was defeat Meng Chao and win. As they walked, the two of them arrived at the 100th arena. There were already a dozen people gathered around the arena. One of them was from the Hall of 100 Affairs, acting as the referee. Occasionally, there would be 2 or 3 people walking over from afar. "Look, that's Meng Chao," Liang Haishan said in a low voice. Chu Mu looked over and saw a young man with good looks but a scar on his right cheek talking and laughing with the 2 swordsmen next to him on the side of the stage. "His sword chi is indeed stronger than mine," Chu Mu thought to himself. However, this wasn't the key to victory. Chu Mu didn't care. "Liang Haishan, I knew you'd come," someone said to Liang Haishan with a smile. "Aren't you here too?" Liang Haishan laughed. "Who is he?" the person asked, looking at Chu Mu. "He's also a new student. His name is Chu Mu." Liang Haishan's voice wasn't soft. Everyone present heard him. Suddenly, Meng Chao looked over and stared at Chu Mu for a few breaths. It was as if he wanted to see through Chu Mu. "He's Chu Mu? The one who's going to fight you?" A swordsman next to Meng Chao frowned. "He looks ordinary. There's nothing special about him. His sword chi is only at the entry level of chi transformation," another person said. Liang Haishan was stunned. He didn't expect that the person he brought here would be the one who was going to fight Meng Chao. What a dramatic scene. Meng Chao jumped and landed on the arena. He looked down at Chu Mu and said coldly, "Come up. Let me defeat you with 1 strike. Don't waste time." "Haha, Meng Chao, you can't be like this. No matter what, you're a senior. You should go easy on your junior. Even if you have to defeat him in the end, you should at least give him time to show his strength," a young swordsman who was chatting with Meng Chao said with a mocking smile. "That's right. Defeating a new student with 1 strike is too cruel for him," another person chimed in. Hey, don't be so arrogant. Fighting isn't about talking." Liang Haishan frowned and retorted unhappily, "Besides, can you really defeat him with 1 strike? Liang Haishan, don't tell me you think highly of this new student again? I remember that all the new students you thought highly of weren't that good." "It's none of your business whether I think highly of him or not," Liang Haishan said angrily with a frown. "I'm just reminding you. Don't think highly of a new student so casually. He might embarrass you again." The other person curled his lips. "Well, since both sides are here, let's start the challenge," the deacon of the 100 Affairs Hall interrupted, sounding a little impatient. Chu Mu jumped lightly and landed on the arena, facing Meng Chao with a distance of 20 meters. "Junior brother, I have a good suggestion." Meng Chao's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness. He suddenly said, "I see that you've just entered the inner mansion and haven't practiced the profound level sword aura arts. I guess you won't be interested in the free ordinary version. But the sword aura arts in the scripture pavilion costs a lot of credit. As your senior, I'll take care of you. As long as you can withstand 10 strikes from me, I'll give you 1,000 credits. How about it? That's a good suggestion, isn't it?" The dozen people below the arena suddenly laughed. Of course, they knew very well that this was just one of Meng Chao's tricks. Before the battle started, he wanted to oppress his opponent with his momentum and put his opponent at a disadvantage. In this way, it would be easier to defeat his opponent. Once Chu Mu agreed, he would be affected by Meng Chao, which would be very disadvantageous for the battle. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 208. 1,000 is too little. Chu Mu paused for a moment, then a smile appeared on his face. "Oh, too little? Junior brother, it's not good to be too greedy." Meng Chao smiled and said, "How about this? As long as you can withstand 10 strikes, I'll give you 2,000 credits. That should be enough, right? You should know that even if you become an inner palace student, you can only get 1,000 credits per month under normal circumstances." "I also have a suggestion," Chu Mu suddenly said. "Junior brother, what's your suggestion?" Meng Chao pretended to be surprised, completely different from his previous cold demeanor. "If we're going to play, let's play big." Chu Mu smiled. "I have 20,000 credits as a bet. If you win, the 20,000 credits are yours. If you lose, you have to give me 20,000 credits. Do you dare? 20,000 credits? The people below were stunned. How can a new student have 20,000 credits? There's one possibility, and that is that he got his credits from the 3 natural barriers. That is to say, when Chu-Mu just entered the outer palace, he was at least in the top 10. No, he should be in the top 4. So what if he got first place in the 3 natural barriers? That's the result of the outer palace. It's different from the inner palace. At best, it can be said that this person has a lot of room for improvement, surpassing ordinary people. But now, he hasn't even cultivated a mystic-level sword aura. How can his overall strength compare to Meng Chao, who is already at the initial success of the Qi transformation realm? That's true. Geniuses also need time to grow. Liang Haishan was even more surprised. He didn't expect that a random guide would turn out to be a genius. Meng Chao, accept his bet. If you don't have enough credits, I still have some. The 2 people who were chatting with Meng Chao before started to jeer. I have 15,000 credit. If I get 20,000 more, I'll have 35,000 credits. The mystic level sword aura that I want needs 40,000 credits, Meng Chao thought to himself. When he heard the people below, he clenched his teeth and made a decision. He said firmly, "Fine, I'll bet. I'll take the 20,000 credit. Let the battle begin." The 100 Affairs Hall's deacon saw that both sides had reached an agreement and immediately announced. A fiery red sword Qi condensed and released an astonishing scorching heat as it shot towards Chu-Mu. Chu-Mu moved, and 10 afterimages appeared in a flash to avoid Meng Chao's innate sword Qi. He even appeared beside Meng Chao and drew his sword to attack. He actually cultivated the phantom steps to perfection. The spectators were immediately astonished. Chu-Mu killed Meng Chao with a single slash, but Meng Chao's figure gradually faded away. His real body appeared behind Chu-Mu, and with a single slash of his sword, more than a dozen streams of fire streaked past. Lu Hua directly pierced through Chu-Mu. So it was just an afterimage. Meng Chao's footwork was also at a high level, and he had also perfected it. He did not lose to Chu-Mu. When the 2 of them used their footwork to fight, they moved so quickly that it dazzled the onlookers. The sword Meng Chao used was a low-grade sword, and each slash contained powerful waves of fire. It made the air around him even hotter, and it affected his thirst. But to Chu-Mu, who had achieved a small mastery of sword force, it made no difference. When the 2 swords collided, Meng Chao's strength was stronger than Chu-Mu's, but he could not suppress him. The power that burst out from his sword was often scattered by Chu-Mu in a strange way. After more than 10 slashes, he still could not defeat Chu-Mu. He did not even have the slightest sign of defeating Chu-Mu. Meng Chao frowned. "It's your honor to have me use a super-class sword art against you." Meng Chao let out a low roar and changed his sword technique. It was as if flames had sprung up around his body and became fierce and violent. He thrust his sword forward with the momentum of a raging fire, wanting to burn Chu-Mu to ashes. "It's the fiery sword art. Looks like Meng Chao has already mastered it," the onlookers whispered. "A super-class sword art is very powerful. A new student can't possibly master it. This Chu-Mu is bound to lose." "How pitiful. 20,000 credit. He's too impulsive." Liang Haishan shook his head. Chu-Mu was like a person who lived in fire for eternity. The high temperature could not affect him at all, but the power of a super-class sword art was still very terrifying. At first, it was difficult for him to dodge Meng Chao's fiery sword art. He had integrated 40% of the essence of clouds and combined phantom steps and wind walk to the extreme. Although the essence of clouds could not increase the speed of footwork and body movement, it could make it more unpredictable. Chu-Mu's eyes were unusually bright as he stared at Meng Chao's swordsmanship. Although he had the super-class sword art, wind form, he did not have a super-class sword art. Chu Mu also wanted to know how powerful a superclass sword art was and how much stronger it was compared to an advanced sword art. Unfortunately, Meng Chao's fiery sword art was only at a small mastery level. He had not mastered the killer move, so he performed more than a dozen basic moves. After the first time, Chu Mu knew how to deal with it. How is this possible? They were all shocked that this new student could withstand a superclass sword art and not be defeated. I don't believe that I can't defeat you. Meng Chao was determined. He integrated more than 30% of the essence of fire into his fiery sword art. In an instant, the fire surged as if adding oil to the fire. Its power increased by a lot. Even the basic moves were not inferior to an ordinary advanced sword art killer move. Thinking about it, the power of each move was comparable to an advanced sword art killer move. It was like continuously performing advanced sword art killer move. It was very terrifying. Meng Chao is going all out. The power has increased a lot, but the realm of his swordsmanship is too low. I've already seen through it, Chu Mu thought to himself. After breaking through to the Qi transformation realm, his soul power had increased a lot. Although he still could not release his soul power, his 5 senses had multiplied. It was easier for him to see through the weaknesses of his opponent's swordsmanship. Chu Mu was only dodging now. He did not counterattack because he was looking for a chance to kill with one strike. Chu Mu's entire body seemed to be engulfed in flames. In everyone's eyes, there were only streaks of flames shooting out from Meng Chao's hands. Even the sword couldn't be seen. It was as if Meng Chao wasn't holding a sword, but flames. What a fierce attack! Even I would have a hard time facing it, Liang Haishan said with a serious face. I don't know why this challenge is arranged. The difference is too big. The deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs thought. He subconsciously thought that Chu Mu would lose. Even a swordsman in the initial stage of the Qi transformation realm would have a hard time facing such an attack, let alone a new student. Now, Chu Mu's eyes flashed. He used the cloud-shattering sword explosion with 40% of the essence of clouds to reopen the fire. He stabbed out again like a gust of wind, and a clear sound was heard. In an instant, the burning fire in the sky disappeared like an illusion. Chu Mu's sword stopped steadily at Meng Chao's throat. What's going on? Everyone was stunned. Meng Chao also could not believe the result. He did not even know what was going on. He only felt that his opponent had made a move. Soon, there was a fluctuation of essence in the air, and his sword was knocked away. Chu Mu wins the challenge. The deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs came back to his senses after a while and announced loudly. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 209. 6 Paths Side. It's not easy to keep your hands cold on such a cold day. Give me some monthly tickets to warm yourself up. Meng Chao was not satisfied with his loss. He felt that he had lost not because of his strength, but because of his luck. But no matter what, a loss was a loss, especially under the supervision of the Hundred Affair Hall. He had lost, and there was no way he could go back on his word. If he did not admit it, his reputation would be ruined. Damn it! If I had another chance, he would never have beaten me. Meng Chao clenched his fists and said fiercely. Meng Chao, let's make it clear. Those 5,000 credits are just a loan. You have to pay me back as soon as possible. A young swordsman next to him said. Don't worry. I won't shortchange you. Meng Chao looked at him coldly and said coldly. He snorted and strode away. Look at that attitude. The young swordsman was angry. If I hadn't lent him those 5,000 credits out of kindness, I'd like to see what would have happened to him. It's okay if he didn't thank me, but he treated me with that attitude. He's so despicable. Forget it. Let's go. It's not like you don't know this kind of person. Another person said, what I care more about is that new student called Chu Mu. I didn't see how he defeated Meng Chao. I didn't see it clearly either. Congratulations. It was so unexpected. Liang Haishan laughed. He looked very happy, as if he was the one who had defeated Meng Chao. Chu Mu smiled and nodded. He had expected to defeat Meng Chao, but he did not expect it to be so fast. In fact, with Meng Chao's strength, if he had taken Chu Mu seriously, it would not have been so easy for Chu Mu to defeat him. It could only be said that he had underestimated Chu Mu from the beginning. When he did not defeat Chu Mu in the last 10 moves, he felt a little unbalanced. He did not adjust quickly and used almost all his strength. From the very beginning, when Meng Chao wanted to attack Chu Mu with his imposing manner, Chu Mu's suggestion of a bet was a great counterattack, and before he knew it, Meng Chao was already at a disadvantage. On the other hand, the breakthrough in the Qi transformation realm had not only brought Chu Mu a breakthrough in his sword aura, but also in other aspects. As a result, Chu Mu's advantage had been magnified, and it was only natural that he had defeated Meng Chao. By the way, how did you defeat Meng Chao in the end? Liang Haishan asked curiously. Attack the weak point, Chu Mu said simply. Weakness? Liang Haishan pondered. Everyone knew that attacking the opponent's weak points would defeat them, but the problem was how to find the weak points. This was not a simple matter. It required extremely strong eyesight. This eyesight could be innate, or it could be acquired through hard work. Chu Mu's eyesight originated from his vision sword. Because he had broken through to the Qi transformation realm, his vision sword had also improved. It was only a paper's breadth away from perfection. Finding the weak point was only the first step. Although there were not many swordsmen who could find the opponent's weak point, it was not too rare. The key was whether or not one could hit the weak point after finding it. Only by hitting the weak point could there be an effect. Otherwise, even if the opponent had all the weak points waiting for you, if you could not hit them, you would only feel stifled. You have 20,000 credits. Adding the 20,000 credits you won from Meng Chao, you have a total of 40,000 credit. You can go to the Scripture Tower and choose a Mystic Class mid-grade sword aura art to cultivate, Liang Haishan suggested after he recovered from his shock. Middle-grade Mystic Class. Chu Mu repeated. He really did not want a Mystic Class mid-grade one. He felt that the level was too low. He should at least choose a Mystic Class high-grade one. The sword aura arts in the Scripture Tower, a Mystic Class low-grade one costs 20,000 credits, a middle-grade one costs 40,000, and a high-grade one costs 80,000. Some high-grade sword aura arts even cost 90 to 100,000. As for the best ones, they cost at least 160,000. Liang Haishan explained, such a high number of credits often makes people flinch. For example, you have 40,000 credits as soon as you enter the inner academy. That's already a very high starting point. At least 80,000 academic credits. Chu Mu nodded his head and thought about how to get the remaining 40,000 academic credit. At least 40,000 academic credit. Oh right, you live in the 7,823rd tower, right? I live in the 6,200th tower. I hope we can exchange pointers in the future, Liang Haishan said. Okay. Chu Mu nodded and parted ways with Liang Haishan. He went to Astral Nine's Hall of Hundred Affairs to collect what was rightfully his. Because you defeated Meng Chao and passed the challenge, you will receive an additional low-grade sword as a reward, the Hall of Hundred Affairs administrator said seriously. What element do you need? Wind element, Chu Mu said. He was the first to comprehend the concept of wind. His first super sword technique was also of the wind element, and his first concept was the concept of wind. Wind element. The administrator nodded and got up to walk inside. Chu Mu pulled out the fake clear wind sword and looked at it. There was a conspicuous gap on the blade. It had been caused by the collision with Meng Chao's sword. This wasn't because Chu Mu's strength was inferior to Meng Chao's, but because a fake sword was still a fake sword. It couldn't compare to a real sword. After a while, the administrator walked out with a sheathed sword in his hand. The sheath was light green and had strange patterns on it. The administrator handed the sword to Chu Mu and said, "This is the low-grade Clear Wind sword. It's yours from now on." Clear Wind sword. Chu Mu was slightly stunned. He took the sword, and a trace of absent-mindedness flashed through his eyes. He remembered that when he had obtained the fake Clear Wind sword, the head of the Qingfeng sword sect, Luo Tianxiong, had said that the fake Clear Wind sword was an imitation of the low-grade Clear Wind sword. He didn't think that he would be able to obtain the Clear Wind sword now. This could be considered a kind of fate. His left hand held the sword hilt. There was a familiar yet strange feeling. It was familiar because the fake Clear Wind sword was an imitation of the Clear Wind sword, so it was basically the same. It was strange because it was the real Clear Wind sword, and not the fake Clear Wind sword. There were 3 sharp words on the sheath: Clear Wind sword. Chu Mu's right hand held the sword hilt and used a bit of strength. Immediately, a clear sound rang out, filled with sharpness. It was as if a breeze had blown past his ears. He slowly pulled the sword out. Along with the ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against metal, Chu Mu's eyes were suddenly illuminated by the sword light. His pupils shrank as he stared at the sword. The Clear Wind sword's body was also a light cyan color, but it was even purer than the fake Clear Wind sword's light cyan color. It gave people the feeling that a wisp of wind was attached to it. Chu Mu lightly waved the Clear Wind sword, and the light cyan color suddenly began to flow. Faintly, there seemed to be a clear sound of wind passing through one's ears. The Clear Wind sword can increase the power of wind sword arts by 10%. The 100 Affair Hall's attendant said. 10%. If the complete version of Wind Sword can increase its power by 10%, then it will be even more terrifying. Chu Mu thought to himself. He put down the sheath and used his left hand's index finger and middle finger like a sword. He slowly stroked the Clear Wind sword's body. Feeling the cold touch on his fingertips, he couldn't bear to put it down. But there is a limit to this increase. The 100 Affair Hall's attendant said, because of the limitations of the materials, a low-grade sword can only increase the power of a super-level sword art or skill by 10%. At most, it can increase it by 15%. For those below super-level, it can increase it by 20 or even 30%. Chu Mu nodded. He wasn't surprised. After all, it was only a low-grade sword. If the increase was too much, then it would be heaven-defying. Sometimes, a 10% increase could be the key to turning the situation around. Now I finally have my first sword. Although it is only a low-grade sword, I believe that I can get a high-grade sword, or even a high-grade sword. Chu Mu thought to himself, but before that, I need to obtain another low-rank sword. Only then will the dual sword technique have a place to be used. After reaching the initial level of the dual sword arts, it could increase Chu Mu's power by 30%. Collecting his thoughts, Chu Mu put the sword back into its sheath and hung the fake Clear Wind sword on his waist. His left hand held the real Clear Wind sword. No matter what, the fake Clear Wind sword had been with him for a long time. It had killed and defeated many enemies. Although it couldn't keep up with Chu Mu's footsteps, Chu Mu wouldn't just abandon it. Goodbye, Chu Mu said to the 100 Affair Hall's attendant and turned to leave. At the same time, a person walked in with a majestic gait and blocked Chu Mu's path. This person was tall and strong, with thick eyebrows and big eyes. His masculine face naturally had a domineering aura. His tiger-like eyes stared at Chu Mu for 3 breaths of time before he grinned. Let me introduce myself. I am Huang Fu-tsang, a student of Astral 1 and a member of the Heavenly King Palace. First of all, congratulations on defeating Meng Chao and passing the Heavenly King Palace's test. Now, follow me to Astral 1 and change your identity sword token. You will be a member of the Heavenly King Palace from now on. Chu Mu frowned. So his challenge with Meng Chao had been arranged by the Heavenly King Palace. If it hadn't been for the Heavenly King Palace's interference, he probably wouldn't have met Meng Chao's average opponent. At most, he would have met someone who was also at the beginning of the Qi transformation realm. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The Heavenly King Palace's influence was so great that they could influence the decisions of the 100 Affair Hall. "I'm sorry, but I don't want to join any organization," Chu Mu said indifferently. The Heavenly Emperor Palace was indeed unexpectedly powerful, but Chu Mu had never thought of joining the Heavenly Emperor Palace's sword pavilion. "You don't want to join?" The person from the Heavenly King Palace was stunned. He had thought that Lu Yin would be overjoyed when he heard that he would become a member of the Heavenly King Palace, but it was the opposite. Lu Yin had calmly rejected the offer. The person's face darkened. "You have to think this through. You only have one chance. If you miss it, then you miss it. There won't be a second chance. You should know that with your talent, you will definitely be valued by the Vice Palace Master, and will be heavily nurtured. When the time comes, all kinds of cultivation resources will be at your fingertips, and your strength will increase rapidly. If you refuse, then you will have to spend a lot of time on your own to accumulate bit by bit. For us swordsmen, time is life. Thank you for your kindness, but if I want to join any organization, I will choose the Heavenly King Palace first," Chu Mu said calmly. Although the person's tone wasn't very good, he wasn't aggressive and didn't make Chu Mu feel disgusted. "All right, since you don't want to join, I won't force you. However, the news of you rejecting the Heavenly King Palace's invitation will spread very quickly. When the time comes, some people from the Heavenly King Palace might come looking for trouble with you. You'd better watch out." After the person finished speaking, he left decisively. "I'm afraid you will be in trouble in the future." The 100 Affair Hall's deacon smiled bitterly. Chu Mu smiled and left the 100 Affair Hall. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 210. On the second floor of the 7,823rd Sword Tower, a figure sat cross-legged on a cushion on the balcony. His body was surrounded by waves of spirit qi that gathered from afar and surrounded him. The pure spirit qi was not absorbed into the body, but covered the surface of the body. It flowed through the body like waves and was being refined. Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique Level 3. The Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique was obtained by Chu Mu when he killed a disciple of the Qinglan Sword Sect in the 100 Beasts Valley of Qinglan Mountain. At that time, only the first and second levels were available. After Chu Mu cultivated it, the Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique was able to withstand the sharpness of the 100 Refinements sword. Now, he found the Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique Level 3 in the Great Kuan Sword Mansion's Hidden Art Tower and exchanged it for 10,000 credit. He could finally cultivate it. He focused all his attention and cleared all distracting thoughts. He used his mind to guide the innate sword aura to mix with the surrounding spirit qi and converge it on his body, refining the Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique again and again. When all the Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique Level 3 was refined and compressed into innate sword aura, the Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique Level 3 could be considered successful. According to the description, the Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique Level 3 could withstand the attack of a low-grade sword weapon once. If it could be replenished in time, it could withstand a second or even a third low-grade sword weapon's attack. Although there was only one chance, it could prevent injury or even death in certain unavoidable situations. It was also a good way to save one's life. The refinement progress was unusually slow, indicating that it was not easy to cultivate the Sword Aura Protection Secret Technique Level 3. However, Chu Mu was determined to persevere. After 2 hours, Chu Mu stopped moving the innate sword aura. The spirit qi in the outside world slowly dissipated. He opened his eyes, which were as clear as water. Although the Shangyuan sword aura technique is very good among the yellow class techniques, it is still very difficult to move the innate sword aura protection secret technique level 3. Looks like I have to first obtain a Xian rank cultivation method to cultivate. That's the best choice. Chu Mu stood up and thought to himself. Although there was a black class sword aura protection secret technique level, he did not want to cultivate it. Its level was too low. If he cultivated it, he would have to change his cultivation. He left the sword tower and headed in the direction of the scripture pavilion. Astral 9 was very large, at least 5 times larger than the entire outer palace. At first, Chu Mu wandered around aimlessly, but after a while, he saw a huge stone tablet. There were carvings on the stone tablet that depicted a topographic map of Astral 9. Various locations were marked out, such as the location of the 100 Affairs Hall, the Scripture Pavilion, and the Sword Comprehension Room. After memorizing the route, Chu Mu headed towards the Scripture Pavilion. The inner palace's hidden art tower was far from being comparable to the outer palace. A huge sword tower stood in front of Chu Mu in the shape of a tower. 5 meters above the ground, there was a plaque on the gate. On the plaque, there were 3 big red words written on it: Training Pavilion. The words seemed to contain some kind of mystery. This hidden art pavilion had a total of 5 floors, and its overall height was more than 50 meters. Perhaps it was because it had been there for a long time, or perhaps it was because it had stored many books, but it naturally carried an aura of books that had experienced the vicissitudes of life, making people want to worship it. In front of the hidden art tower, which was over 50 meters tall, anyone would feel insignificant. Unlike the outer palace, there were many people going in and out of the hidden art tower, making it seem very lively. Chu Mu stood still and took a few glances before stepping into the hidden technique tower's entrance and entering the tower. Rows upon rows of neatly arranged bookshelves appeared in front of him. There were many compartments on the bookshelves, and within each compartment were many books. Beside each book was a brief introduction to the book's contents. The books here were also divided into categories. There were sword aura arts, swordsmanship, movement techniques, secret techniques, and even some miscellaneous travel note. Chu Mu's goal was to choose a sword aura art that he liked, so he quickly scanned through the bookshelves and found the section where sword aura arts were categorized. They're all just low-grade, profound-level sword aura arts. He frowned slightly. If you want a higher-grade sword aura art, you'll have to go upstairs, a student said casually as he passed by. Thank you, Chu Mu said and walked up the stairs to the second floor without hesitation. There were many students on the second floor, and they were still choosing sword aura art. Glancing at the bookshelves, they were all mid-grade profound-level sword aura arts. It seems that the profound-level sword aura arts should be on the 3rd floor. If that's the case, could the profound-level sword aura arts be on the 4th floor? Because the hidden art tower was shaped like a tower, the 1st floor was the largest and naturally had the most books. The 2nd floor was second, and the 3rd floor had even fewer books. Although Chu Mu did not go to the 4th floor, he knew that the 4th floor would definitely be smaller than the 3rd floor, and the books collected there would definitely be fewer. Chu Mu's ideal goal was a profound-level sword aura art. If there were profound-level sword aura arts, it would naturally be better. However, profound-level sword aura arts required too many credits, at least 160,000. For someone like him who only had 40,000 credits, he did not know when he would be able to gather enough credits to exchange. I'll take a look at the sword aura arts on the 3rd floor first, and then go to the 4th floor to take a look. Finally, I'll make my choice based on my satisfaction and needs, Chu Mu said to himself. Since the beginning of cultivating sword aura arts, Chu Mu had focused on elemental attribute. Naturally, his first choice was elemental attribute. Elemental attributes could also be called non-elemental attribute. It meant that it did not enhance any swordsmanship or movement skills. It was a balanced cultivation method. Some people said that balance meant weakness, while others believed that balance meant strength. However, whether it was strong or weak still needed to be determined by the individual and the actual situation. For Chumu, although elemental sword aura arts could not enhance the power of other swordsmanships, it would not weaken the power of other swordsmanships either. Moreover, due to its attribute, it would not be easily restrained. Chumu's swordsmanship was not of a single attribute. So far, he had only cultivated wind, cloud, and metal swordsmanship. Regardless of whether he cultivated wind, cloud, or metal swordsmanships, the enhancement of one attribute would naturally weaken the other two. Standing in front of the bookshelf of sword aura arts, Chumu's eyes lit up slightly as he carefully looked through the shelves one by one. Icicle sword aura art, profound level high grade. 7 levels in total. Focuses on ice elemental innate sword aura. Enhances ice elemental swordsmanship by 30%. Requires 80,000 credit. Purple thunder phaseless art, profound level high grade. 8 levels in total. Focuses on lightning elemental innate sword aura. Enhances lightning elemental swordsmanship by 30% and lightning elemental movement skills by 10%. Requires 90,000 credit. As he searched, Chumu's gaze was suddenly attracted by a sword aura art. 9 transformations of heaven origin, profound level high grade. 9 levels in total. Focuses on elemental innate sword aura. Cannot enhance the power of any swordsmanship or movement skills. However, after cultivating to the 9th level, the innate sword aura will be 50% thicker than the sword aura cultivated from sword aura arts of the same level. The recovery speed of innate sword aura will also be 50% faster. Requires 100,000 credit. 100,000. Chumu sucked in a breath of cold air. If the calculation was based on the 1,000 credits that Inner Palace students received every month, then 100,000 credits would take 100 months. That would take more than 8 years. It was too long. 9 transformations of heaven origin will be my first choice if there is no sword aura art that I am more satisfied with on the 4th floor. Chumu thought to himself as he walked up the stairs to the 4th floor. The 4th floor was indeed smaller than the 3rd floor. The number of books on the 4th floor had also decreased by more than half. Searching through the bookshelves of sword aura arts, although they were all top-quality Xian rank sword aura arts, Chumu didn't find any Yuan-type sword aura art. Moreover, these top-quality Xian rank sword aura arts required at least 160,000 academic credit. Fine, I'll use the 9 transformations of heaven origin as my goal and try to gather 100,000 credits as soon as possible. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 211. How can I collect 100,000 credits in the shortest time possible? After leaving the Hidden Art Pavilion, Chumu returned to his own sword tower and kept thinking along the way. Chumu. A voice came from not far away, startling Chumu. Turning around to look, Liang Haishan walked over with a smile on his face. So you were here. No wonder I didn't see any movement when I went to your sword tower to look for you. Looking for me? What's the matter? Chumu asked. Of course there's something, but it's a good thing. Liang Haishan laughed and said, Let's go. I will take you to a place. Where? Chumu asked. To attend a swordsmanship seminar. Liang Haishan explained, You are a new student and have just arrived, so you are not familiar with the inner mansion. I will take you to the seminar. On the one hand, you can exchange swordsmanship experiences with others. On the other hand, you can get to know more people. It will be easier to find partners when you want to do missions or experience in the future. Exchange swordsmanship experiences. Chumu thought for a while. Is this swordsmanship seminar an organization like the Heavenly King Palace? No, the nature is completely different. An organization like the Heavenly King Palace is headed by the Palace Master. The others are all subservient to the Palace Master and serve the entire Heavenly King Palace. Liang Haishan shook his head and explained, the Swordsmanship Seminar is a spontaneous and idle organization. The purpose of the organization is to exchange swordsmanship and cultivation experiences and to discuss and learn from each other. Whether you are willing to participate or not is voluntary. It will not be forced, and you don't have to pay any price. In short, as long as you don't maliciously stir up trouble, you can even listen on the side and not express any opinions. Chu Mu understood after Liang Haishan's explanation. Then let's go, Chu Mu said. He also wanted to know the level of swordsmanship of the Inner Mansion students. Since the Swordsmanship Seminar was an idle organization, it would not form any restrictions on him. Okay, come with me. Liang Haishan smiled and explained to Chu Mu as he led the way. Swordsmanship seminars are very common in the Inner Mansion, but they have different names. The swordsmanship seminar we're going to is called the Sword Sparring Meeting. The organizer is Senior Brother Situ Ko, who possesses the cultivation of Deshang's sword qi in the qi transformation realm. His swordsmanship attainments are exceptional. In the last Inner House Swordsmanship King competition, he ranked in the top 1,000. Swordsmanship King competition? Liang Haishan blurted out another new term, making Chu Mu a little curious. You've just entered the Inner Palace, so there are many things you don't know. The Inner Palace is not like the Outer Palace, where you can read the Inner Palace's rules. Liang Haishan smiled and said, You must know that to us swordsmen, profound sword qi cultivation and powerful sword techniques are all very important. However, the attainment of basic sword techniques is also an indispensable part. If one's attainments in basic swordsmanship were not deep enough, it would be extremely difficult to cultivate more advanced swordsmanship in the future. Therefore, the Sword Mansion will hold the Swordsmanship King competition once every 3 years. In the competition, sword qi and other sword techniques are not allowed. Only basic sword techniques are allowed to compete. Chu Mu suddenly understood, and an uncontrollable strong interest burst out from the bottom of his heart. A swordsmanship competition that only used basic sword techniques was like an eagle soaring in the sky to his heart's content. Speaking of which, the next Swordsmanship King competition will begin in half a year. Liang Haishan said, Don't underestimate the top 1,000. You must know that there are more than 70,000 students in the Inner Palace. Although not everyone will participate, at least half of them will. To be able to rank in the top 1,000 among tens of thousands of people, one's swordsmanship attainments is also very remarkable. Senior Brother Situ Ko is modest and polite. After the sword sparring meeting, if you have any questions about swordsmanship, you can ask him. Senior Brother Situ Ko will naturally guide you. Okay. Chu Mu nodded. At this time, Chu Mu's mind was attracted by the so-called Swordsmanship King competition, temporarily forgetting the idea of collecting credits as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would have definitely asked Liang Haishan. Under Liang Haishan's lead, they passed by one sword tower after another. The sword tower they passed by now was a 3-story sword tower. Chu Mu knew that it was a profound level sword tower. In the Inner Palace, the sword towers were divided into 4 levels: Heaven, Earth, Profound, and Yellow. The Yellow level sword tower had 2 floors, the Profound level sword tower had 3 floors, the Earth level sword tower had 4 floors, and the Heaven level sword tower had 5 floors. Along the way, Liang Haishan did not show any signs of stopping. He kept telling Chu Mu all kinds of things about the Inner Palace. These were things that the Outer Palace Master did not mention before, so that Chu Mu could have a better understanding of the Inner Palace. Is it possible that Situ Ko does not live in the Profound level sword tower, but in the Earth level sword tower? A thought popped up in Chu Mu's mind. The residence rights of different levels of sword towers represented strength. Being able to live in the Earth level sword tower was enough to show that Situ Ko's strength was very strong. Sure enough, Liang Haishan stopped in front of a 4-story sword tower's seal. This is the sword tower where Senior Brother Situ Ko lives. the Earth-level sword tower. The sword sparring meeting is also held in this sword tower, Liang Haishan said as he touched the seal. Not long after, someone appeared from the sword tower and flashed to the seal. Liang Haishan, so it's you. The person glanced at Chu Mu, but did not care. Instead, he smiled at Liang Haishan and took out a sword token and placed it on the seal. Immediately, a door opened for Liang Haishan and Chu Mu to enter. Zhou Ting, you're earlier than me again. Liang Haishan smiled and said. He seemed to be very familiar with Zhou Ting. I'm the third one here. Of course I'm earlier than you, Zhou Ting said. Then he looked at Chu Mu and said, I don't know you, but you've just entered the Qi transformation realm. Are you a new student? He is indeed a new student, but don't underestimate him. Not long ago, he defeated Meng Chao in a head-on fight. Also, he was in the top 4 in the 3 natural barriers. He's not simple. Liang Haishan introduced. So you're the one who defeated Meng Chao. Zhou Ting looked at Chu Mu from head to toe, as if he wanted to see what was different about Chu Mu. However, he was not familiar with Chu Mu, so he did not have a good or bad impression of him. His impression of him was average. Liang Haishan, although such a talented junior brother should be taken care of, this time, Zhuang Tong is also here. He will definitely target you. I'm afraid that Chu Mu will also be affected. Zhuang Tong. Meng Chao frowned. Why is he here again? I don't know. Zhou Ting said. If he's here, then he's here. He's just a loser. What's there to be afraid of? Liang Haishan snorted coldly. It's hard to say. I heard that he had a fortuitous encounter when he was out on a mission. Not only did his cultivation increase, his sword skills also increased by a lot. As for how much, I don't know, Zhou Ting said. He then looked at Chu Mu. I think it's best if you don't go in for now. Zhuang Tong is not easy to get along with. He might make things difficult for you, and it'll be bad for your future cultivation. Before Chu Mu could say anything, Liang Haishan spoke first. No need. I'm here. Let's see what Zhuang Tong dares to do. Even if his strength has increased, I'm not stagnant. If I can defeat him once, I can defeat him a second time. Do whatever you want. Zhou Ting might be familiar with Liang Haishan, but their relationship had not reached the point where they could talk to each other. Since his advice was useless, he did not continue. Chu Mu, if Zhuang Tong makes things difficult for you later, don't say anything. Leave everything to me. Liang Haishan took a deep breath and said. Chu Mu nodded and did not reply. It was not his style to not fight back when being bullied. However, he didn't need to explain this to others. As soon as they stepped into the sword tower, dozens of people jumped into their sight. The first floor of the Earth-level sword tower was even larger. It was more than 1,000 square meters. Dozens of people sat cross-legged in a circle with a cushion each. One of them seemed to be the center. Chu Mu's gaze also fell on that person. His face was like jade, and his temperament was 70% masculine and 30% gentle. His sword-like eyebrows and three-dimensional facial features could be called a handsome man. Without Liang Haishan's introduction, Chu Mu knew that this person was the owner of this sword tower, Situ Ko. Liang Haishan and Chu Mu's entrance attracted the attention of a small number of people. They turned around and nodded as a greeting, but did not say anything. Liang Haishan and Chu Mu found 2 empty cushions and sat down. The atmosphere made Chu Mu feel like a student sitting in a classroom listening to a teacher's lecture. Situ Ko was slowly explaining some of his understanding of swordsmanship. Chu Mu listened carefully. His understanding of swordsmanship is indeed not bad. If placed on Earth, he would be equivalent to a swordsmanship master. Not long after, Chu Mu judged in his heart. Swordsmanship masters were also divided into different levels. Entry-level swordsmanship master, Deshang master, was the most common classification. In the past, the opponents Chu Mu had encountered were at most at the beginner stage of sword technique master. Back then, Xiao Qianfeng barely counted as such. This Situ Ko's explanation of sword techniques had barely reached the small success stage of sword technique master. This made Chu Mu somewhat surprised. Judging by the situation, his swordsmanship attainment should be at entry-level swordsmanship master. Situ Ko explained for a while more. His gaze fell on Chu Mu's face and he smiled. It seems that we have a new member of the Sword Conference. Junior brother, please introduce yourself. My name is Chu Mu. I just entered the inner mansion, Chu Mu said. Chu Mu, I think I've heard of this name before. Someone muttered with a thoughtful expression. Isn't that the new student who defeated Meng Chao? Oh yes, that should be him. You defeated an old student when you just entered the inner mansion. Not bad. It seems that your swordsmanship attainment is not low. Suddenly, someone stood up with a strange smile on his face. It just so happens that I've improved my swordsmanship after returning from my trip. I feel pretty good about myself. Junior brother, why don't we have a spar? Zhuang Tong, if your hands are itchy, I don't mind sparring with you. Liang Haishan stood up and sneered. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 212. You. Zhuang Tong glanced at Liang Haishan and sneered. I haven't even looked for you, but you jumped out yourself. You were only able to defeat me last time because of luck. This time, both my cultivation and sword arts have improved a lot. You are not my opponent at all. Jumping out is just asking for your own humiliation. The reason why they had a conflict last time was because Liang Haishan brought a new student to the sword conference. Zhuang Tong was very arrogant and liked to tease the new student in the name of giving pointers. Liang Haishan was the one who brought the new student. Being teased by Zhuang Tong naturally made Liang Haishan lose face, so Liang Haishan had to step in. The conflict between the two evolved from a sword art fight to a sword battle arena. The result might have been luck or strength, but Liang Haishan was slightly better and defeated Zhuang Tong with one sword. Zhuang Tong was very arrogant and narrow-minded, so he hated Liang Haishan. This time, he had a fortuitous encounter during the mission, and his strength had improved significantly. The first thing he wanted to do when he returned to the Sword Mansion was to find Liang Haishan and settle the score. Coincidentally, Situ Ko was holding another sword technique conference, so he planned to humiliate Liang Haishan at the sword technique conference. Coincidentally, Liang Haishan brought a new student, who seemed to have some background. This way, it would be more fun to tease him. How can a loser talk about bravery? Liang Haishan sneered and his aura fluctuated. He faced Zhuang Tong and said, Do you dare to fight with me? The others didn't say anything. They were very clear about the conflict between the two, and they were also very clear about what kind of person Zhuang Tong was. They didn't want to offend someone like Zhuang Tong. If you want to fight, then fight with pure sword arts to avoid hurting our friendship, Situ Ko said. His status and strength were far above the others, so his words carried a lot of weight. Zhuang Tong didn't dare to have any thoughts. Okay, let's do as Brother Situ said. We will fight with pure sword arts. If I lose, I will get out of here. If you lose, you will kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times. Zhuang Tong sneered and said. The conditions he proposed made everyone's expression change. Once they did that, they would lose all their dignity. Okay, everyone here can testify, Liang Haishan said firmly, unable to get off the tiger's back. The first floor of the Earth-level sword tower was very large. A pure sword fight would not result in sword aura, and the impact would not be large. It could be carried out completely within the sword tower. Liang Haishan and Zhuang Tong drew their swords and faced each other from 10 meters away. This time, I want you to know that you are not my opponent at all, Zhuang Tong shouted in a low voice. He stabbed out with his sword, and an astonishing whistling sound rang out, shaking everyone's eardrums. Once an expert made a move, one would be able to tell whether or not he was an expert. Zhuang Tong's sword strike seemed simple, but its momentum was extraordinary. It was sharp and threatening, showing his outstanding swordsmanship attainments. Chu Mu's expression did not change. Situ Ko nodded slightly, thinking that although Zhuang Tong was not a good person, his swordsmanship had indeed improved a lot. Liang Haishan's expression changed slightly as he hurriedly blocked with his sword. He forcefully deflected Zhuang Tong's sword and took advantage of the momentum to slash out diagonally. There were 12 basic sword techniques on the ancient sword continent, but no one would foolishly follow the 12 basic sword techniques in a real battle. Acting on the spot, changing according to the situation, finding an opening in the opponent's sword to defeat the opponent. It was easier said than done. One needed to practice the basic sword techniques diligently and have a strong foundation to be able to use them as one wished. As if he had expected Liang Haishan's reaction, Zhuang Tong calmly moved his feet to dodge the sword and counterattacked with astonishing speed and sharpness. Liang Haishan hurriedly slashed out with his sword. The two swords collided and sparks flew. The ear-piercing sound of metal clashing resounded in the surroundings. Different people would have different styles of the same basic sword technique. For example, Liang Haishan was tall and sturdy, so his physical strength was naturally stronger than the average person. Basic sword techniques emphasized strength, and he could attack and defend freely. Zhuang Tong had a crafty personality, and his basic sword technique style was as crafty as his personality. Sword light flashed and collided. The same sword technique with different styles clashed, and for a moment, there was no clear winner. Even without using sword qi, a qi transformation realm swordsman's body had been tempered by spirit qi, so a basic sword technique could display terrifying power. Some powerful qi transformation realm swordsmen could even rely on their physical strength to drive a basic sword technique to kill a half-step qi transformation realm swordsman. Countless sparks flew in the air like dazzling fireworks. Liang Haishan and Zhuang Tong displayed their full strength, swinging their swords repeatedly. Sword light flashed. Zhuang Tong's sword was faster and more agile, often stabbing from strange angles. On the other hand, Liang Haishan's attacks were bold and forceful. Every time, he seemed to barely be able to block Zhuang Tong's sword and counterattack. It seemed that the two of them were evenly matched. However, Situ Ko and Chu Mu could both see that Liang Haishan was actually at a disadvantage. Zhuang Tong's mastery of basic sword techniques was indeed better than Liang Haishan's, and he gradually grasped the rhythm. In a battle between two swordsmen, whoever grasped the rhythm would win. This was common sense. Liang Haishan is about to lose, Situ Ko whispered. Chu Mu thought to himself. Sure enough, Zhuang Tong once again stabbed out with his sword. Liang Haishan blocked with his sword, but it missed. Zhuang Tong was only feinting, and he quickly retracted his sword. Taking advantage of Liang Haishan's counterattack, Zhuang Tong spun around and appeared beside Liang Haishan, stabbing out with his sword. The tip of the sword landed firmly on Liang Haishan's neck. I've said it before. You were just lucky last time. You're no match for me. Zhuang Tong sneered, unable to hide the smugness in his eyes. He pointed his sword at Liang Haishan and said, "Kneel down and kowtow." Liang Haishan clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He gritted his teeth, and his eyes were bloodshot from anger. If he knelt down and kowtowed, his reputation would be ruined. If he didn't, his reputation would be ruined. He was in a dilemma. Situ Ko frowned slightly, as if thinking about something. Chu Mu stood up, immediately attracting everyone's attention. What? You want to make a move and spar with me? Zhuang Tong said with a mocking tone and a mocking expression. How about this? I'll give you a chance. You fight with me. If you can beat me, Liang Haishan won't have to kneel down, and I'll roll out of here. If you lose, you and Liang Haishan will have to kneel down and kowtow to me. Sure, Chu Mu said. His tone was neither fast nor slow. He was calm, but it was shocking. Chu Mu, you. Liang Haishan was stunned. Chu Mu nodded and walked to Liang Haishan's side, facing Zhuang Tong. A basic sword battle? He was never afraid. Very good, very courageous. Zhuang Tong sneered. But, I won't go easy on you just because you're a new student. You talk too much, Chu Mu said. Zhuang Tong's expression changed. He stabbed his sword at a tricky angle. Chu Mu took a step back and dodged the sword. Zhuang Tong attacked again and again. Every sword was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. It was not fast, and the angle was strange. There was a hissing sound as if the air was being torn apart. Chu Mu did not pull out his sword. He just moved his feet, and often Zhuang Tong's sword missed. Everyone was shocked. Situ Ko frowned. He could not understand the fight in front of him. However, until now, it only showed that Chu Mu's reaction speed was fast, but it did not show how good his basic sword skills were. Zhuang Tong suddenly withdrew his sword after each attack missed. His expression was somewhat unsightly. Other than dodging, don't you know how to use your sword? Or are you afraid of embarrassing yourself? Zhuang Tong mocked. Junior brother, you're competing based on sword skills. You'll win based on pure sword skills, not on movement techniques, Siduko said. I'm just giving you a chance to use your sword. Since you're not willing, I'll defeat you with one sword, Chu Mu said. Defeat me with one sword? Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? Zhuang Tong laughed. The others had strange expressions. They were stunned and even mocking. This new student was really overestimating himself. He dared to talk about defeating Zhuang Tong with one sword. Situ Ko shook his head slightly. He originally thought that Chu Mu was arrogant, but now he felt that not only was he overestimating himself, but he was also a little arrogant. His impression of Chu Mu plummeted. Even if his sword skills were better than Zhuang Tong's, he did not dare to say that he could defeat Zhuang Tong with one sword. You'll know soon. Chu Mu did not care about the other's reaction. I'll see how you can defeat me with one sword. Zhuang Tong's face became gloomy. There seemed to be a strange light flashing in his eyes. He suddenly took a step forward and attacked with his sword. The sharp sword light seemed to pierce through the void, and there was a sharp whistling sound that hurt people's eardrums. The sword light was so dazzling that people did not dare to look directly at it. Liang Haishan's expression changed, and he realized that Zhuang Tong had not used his full strength. Chu Mu's vision was not affected at all. When the sword light was about to reach him, he pulled out his sword with lightning speed. Everyone heard the sound of metal clashing, and the scene in front of them was like a picture scroll. Zhuang Tong's sword had stabbed to Chu Mu's side. The sword missed, and Chu Mu's sword tip was firmly pressed against Zhuang Tong's throat. If he used a little more force, it would pierce Zhuang Tong's throat and take his life. You've lost. Get out, Chu Mu said. Zhuang Tong's pale face became even paler. His pupils dilated and contracted. Cold sweat quickly seeped from his forehead. He looked at the others, hoping that someone would say a few good words for him. But everyone was immersed in the shock of Chu Mu defeating Zhuang Tong with one sword. They did not notice Zhuang Tong's gaze. Even if they did, they would not care. Get out! Liang Haishan was relieved. He felt like he had drunk a bowl of ice sour plum soup on a hot summer day. Everyone came to their senses. Senior brother Situ. Zhuang Tong hurriedly called out. Situ Ko frowned. If Zhuang Tong did not speak, he would not have said anything. But now, he was in a difficult position. Junior brother, can you give me some face this time and let this matter go? Situ Ko thought for a moment, then finally said to Chu Mu, I owe you a favor. I'm only speaking on behalf of someone else, Chu Mu said as he sheathed his sword. Fine. Since senior brother Situ has spoken, I can't not give you face. But from now on, Zhuang Tong, whether you meet me or Chu Mu, you must make way, Liang Haishan said decisively. I'll remember, Zhuang Tong said through gritted teeth. He lowered his head and left in a sorry state. Then, the atmosphere became lively. Chu Mu became the center of attention. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 213. With junior brothers' attainments in swordsmanship, in the King of Swordsmanship competition half a year later, you will definitely get a good ranking. Situko said. What are the rewards for the King of Swordsmanship competition? Chu Mu asked curiously. The top 1,000 rankings will be announced. Only the top 100 will have actual rewards. Although the rewards are not the same each time, they are mostly credits, secret manuals, swords, weapons, pills, elixirs, or spirit stones. Situko laughed. After that, Chu Mu and Liang Haishan left the sword discourse competition because it was over. Chu Mu, what are you planning to do next? Liang Haishan asked while walking. That's right, is there any way to gather enough academic credits in a short period of time? Chu Mu finally remembered and hastily asked. Collect enough credits in a short period of time? Liang Haishan muttered. Inner house disciples can only get 1,000 credits per month. This is far from enough for us. As far as I know, there are 2 ways to quickly get credit. One is to use spirit stones to exchange. 1 low-grade spirit stone can be exchanged for 10 credits, but there is no way to exchange it in reverse. The second way is to complete missions. Completing a mission can at least earn a few thousand credit. Some can even earn a few 100,000 credit. Spirit stone exchange. Chu Mu shook his head. This wasn't worth it at all. He only had 100 or so low-grade spirit stones. At best, he could only exchange them for 1,000 or so points. Eliminating this method, the only way left was to do missions. I suggest you take missions. Take missions according to your strength. After completing them, you can get at least a few thousand credits. If you do it a few times, you can get tens of thousands of credits. Liang Haishan suggested. The missions are in the Hall of 100 Affairs. Do you want to go take a look? Okay. Chu Mu nodded. Once again, he arrived at the Hall of 100 Affairs. The missions of the Hall of 100 Affairs were all listed on a wall in the hall. This wall had a unique power. Although the mission was presented in text, it was not written. It felt like an LCD panel. Other than Chu Mu and Liang Haishan, there were a dozen other students standing in front of the mission panel, looking carefully at the missions, as if they were choosing. Chu Mu looked at it carefully and found that the missions listed on the mission panel were divided into 4 levels of difficulty: easy, medium, difficult, and extremely difficult. There was a huge difference in the credits obtained after completing missions of different difficulty levels. For example, there was a simple mission that Chu Mu was looking at right now. This mission was called Collect Spirit Herbs. The description of the mission was to collect mid-grade spirit herbs, no matter what kind of spirit herbs they were. A mid-grade spirit herb could be exchanged for 1,000 academic credits, while a high-grade spirit herb could be exchanged for 5,000 academic credit. It seemed very simple and easy to earn, but one had to know that spirit herbs were not that easy to find. Although it was not very dangerous, it would take a lot of time to go back and forth. It was not worth it to earn less than 10,000 academic credit. The credits obtained from simple missions are generally between 3,000 to 8,000. The good ones can even reach 10,000. Liang Haishan explained as he watched. The credits awarded for completing the medium difficulty missions range from 10,000 to 30,000. As for the hard difficulty missions, the credits awarded for completing them range from 30,000 to 100,000. The credits awarded for the extremely hard missions are more than 100,000. However, the difficulty of these missions is also related to one's strength. Liang Haishan seemed very familiar with the missions. For example, take the simple missions as an example. Look at this mission of killing a one-horned green wolf and harvesting its horn. Generally, one can complete it with a cultivation of the initial Qi transformation realm. This is because the one-horned green wolf's strength is not high. It is at the bottom of the low-level demonic beast. However, If one's cultivation is only at the initial Qi transformation realm, it will be somewhat dangerous. The mid-grade missions require Deshang's cultivation of the Qi transformation realm. The hard missions require a cultivation of the Qi transformation realm. As for the extremely difficult missions, they generally require several people to work together to complete them. Of course, there are some exceptions. For example, some geniuses who can fight across realms can often complete the missions alone. Chumu nodded and looked carefully at each mission. His focus fell on the mid-grade missions. The credits obtained from simple missions were too few. Although the credits obtained from hard missions could be obtained, they were extremely difficult. With his current strength, he did not have much confidence in completing them. Only the mid-grade missions were more moderate. I only need to accept 2 mid-grade missions. After completing them, I can obtain at least 40,000 academic credit. At that time, I can exchange them for the 9 revolutions' heavenly origin, Chu Mu said inwardly. He began to look for suitable missions in the mid-grade missions area. Although this mission can obtain 30,000 academic credits, it will take at least 4 months. That's too long. I can't do it. This one only needs 2 months. However, it can only obtain 10,000 academic credit. The efficiency is too low. He browsed through them one by one, eliminating them based on reality. It would be great if we could encounter a group mission, Liang Haishan suddenly said. What's a group mission? Chumu was a newbie at this time. A group mission is a mission with no difficulty level. Anyone can accept it. Someone explained, after accepting a group mission, the final reward will be based on the individual's harvest. Some people's harvest can exceed 100,000 academic credits, but some people's harvest can't even reach 1,000 academic credit. Some people even lose their lives. Although it's a little dangerous, a group mission is a good mission to obtain a lot of academic credit. It's just that group missions are very rare and only appear occasionally. Liang Haishan added, I've never encountered a group mission since entering the inner mansion. It's said that there has only been one group mission in the past 10 years. As he spoke, the mission panel suddenly flashed as if it had been refreshed. Everyone took a closer look and found that it was still the same mission as before. Just as they were puzzled, someone pointed at the mission panel and stammered, Red mission. Chu Mu and the others were shocked when they heard this. They hurriedly looked over and saw that there was an additional mission at the top of the mission panel. This mission was described in blood-red words. Blood-red words! Liang Haishan and the others exclaimed in a low voice. They looked at each other and recalled the legend. Their voices suddenly trembled. This is a group mission. Yes, it's a group mission. Group missions are all presented in blood-red words, a student said with certainty. Are you sure you're not seeing things? Is it really a group mission? Liang Haishan and the others could not remain calm. They were just talking about group missions. Could it be that they were all magpie mouths and group missions appeared as soon as they were mentioned? After several confirmations, everyone was finally sure that this was a group mission. They were overjoyed. Blood Demon Realm. This group mission is to enter the Blood Demon Realm to hunt blood demons and obtain blood demon cores. A 1-striped blood demon core can be exchanged for 100 credits, a 2-striped blood demon core for 200 credits, a 3-striped blood demon core for 300 credits, a 4-striped blood demon core for 400 credits, and a 5-striped blood demon core for 500 credit. In addition, there are also blood evil stones. Blood essence. A student read out the contents of the group mission. The entrance to the Blood Demon Realm will open tomorrow afternoon. The entrance to the Blood Demon Realm will last for a month. Afternoon. According to the concept of Earthlings, afternoon was between 3 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It is said that the blood demons at the first level of the Blood Demon Realm are all small blood demons. They are equivalent to the Qi Transformation Realm and can be hunted. I'm going to do this mission. I'm going to do it too. Let's go back and prepare now. Immediately, everyone dispersed and left. Liang Haishan also bid farewell to Chu Mu and went to prepare for this group mission. 1 month's time to hunt blood demons and obtain blood demon cores. I'm going to do this mission too, Chu Mu said to himself as he walked towards his own sword tower. When he walked to the front of the sword tower, he saw a student standing in front of the seal of the sword tower with a sword on his back. He was using his fingers to release sword energy to attack the seal. What do you want? Chu Mu looked at the stranger and asked indifferently. Are you the owner of this sword tower? The other party frowned and asked in return. Chu Mu nodded and did not answer. He roughly knew the other party's intention because he saw a symbol on the other party's sleeve. It was the symbol of the Heavenly King's Palace. It seems that you are the person I'm looking for. Remember, my name is Gu Shiping, a member of the Heavenly King's Palace. The other party sneered and said, I heard that you rejected the invitation of the Heavenly King's Palace and were unwilling to join them. What makes you dare to reject the invitation of the Heavenly King's Palace? What makes you worthy of being invited by the Heavenly King's Palace? This has nothing to do with you. Chu Mu's tone was very cold. He was speechless towards this kind of person who was used to being self-righteous. Some people were just like this. They always had a sense of superiority and were very self-righteous. They felt that they could do whatever they wanted. Of course it has something to do with me. Gu Shiping's expression was a little gloomy. He directly pulled out his sword and pointed it at Chu Mu. Back then, I had to put in a lot of effort to join the Heavenly King's Palace. You, on the other hand, are just a new student. You actually rejected the invitation of the Heavenly King's Palace. Chu Mu was even more speechless. It turned out that he was wrong. The other party did not have a sense of superiority, but rather a sense of inferiority and jealousy. I will pay 40,000 academic credits to enter the sword battle arena. If you win, it will be yours. If you lose, you have to give me 40,000 academic credits. Chu Mu went straight to the point and said, If you agree, go to the 100 Affair Hall and apply. If you don't, disappear from my sight immediately. 40,000 academic credits. Gu Shiping's breath paused. His aggressive aura weakened a lot because he could not take out 40,000 academic credits right now. Chu Mu's aura was not weak at all. In fact, it was very strong. He directly pressed on towards Gu Shiping. Fine. Just you wait. Tomorrow, I will go to the 100 Affair Hall and apply. Gu Shiping said fiercely after a slight hesitation. He sheathed his sword, glared at Chu Mu, turned around and left in large strides. Tomorrow? I won't have the chance tomorrow. Chu Mu thought to himself. He turned around and walked into the forbidden area. He also had to make some preparations to deal with the group mission to enter the Blood Demon realm tomorrow to hunt blood demons and ensure a greater harvest. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 214. The space inside the spatial bracelet is 1 cubic meter. There are still some left after putting in more than 100 low-grade spirit stones. There are also 5 meridian recovery elixirs, 7 aura recovery elixirs, and 4 scarlet blood elixirs. I'll take them all. Other than that, I don't need to take anything else to avoid taking up too much space in the spatial bracelet. In the sword tower, Chu Mu was organizing the things inside the spatial bracelet. He didn't know what a blood demon looked like. He also didn't know how big a blood demon nucleus was. But for convenience, it would be good to clear out some space inside the spatial bracelet. After making the necessary preparations, Chu Mu went to sleep. The next day, he woke up early to do his usual cultivation. In the afternoon, the seal of the sword tower was activated. It was Liang Haishan. Chu Mu, let's go together, Liang Haishan said with a smile. Chu Mu nodded. He held the breeze sword in his left hand and carried a fake sword on his back. Why do you have 2 swords? Liang Haishan asked curiously. Personal habit, Chu Mu said with a smile. Liang Haishan nodded and didn't ask. Instead, he talked about something else. How much do you know about blood demons? Please enlighten me. I wouldn't dare to enlighten you, but I went to the ancient books yesterday and learned about the blood demon realm and blood demons. The blood demon realm lacks spiritual energy, so you have to pay attention to the use of sword energy. Also, the ancient books say that humans can't stay in the blood demon realm for a long time, or their minds will be affected. Liang Haishan laughed and said, "It is said that the blood demon realm is divided into 3 levels. The first level's blood demons are called small blood demons. Their strength is equivalent to us swordsmen in the Qi transformation realm. Of course, blood demons are different from us humans. Their power comes from blood. They absorb blood to increase their strength, which is very evil. It is not easy to kill a blood demon. Their skin is very tough. Even fake swords can't do anything to them. Also, their self-healing ability is very strong. Unless you can hit the blood demon's heart with a sword and destroy it. Otherwise, if they are injured, they will heal quickly. But if they are injured, they will bleed non-stop. Small blood demons should have different levels of strength, right? Chu Mu recalled the description of 1 or 2 blood demons on the mission. That's right. 1-striped blood demons are the weakest. Their strength is equivalent to us swordsmen who have entered the Qi transformation realm. 2-striped blood demons are equivalent to those who have achieved initial success in the Qi transformation realm. 3-striped blood demons are equivalent to those who have achieved Qi transformation Deshang. 4-striped blood demons are equivalent to those who have achieved Qi transformation realm. Although the 5-mark blood demons don't have the power of the Qi high realm, they are very powerful in the Qi transformation realm. I think that normal warriors in the peak of the Qi transformation realm are no match for them. In our sword mansion, only the senior brothers on the bronze sword ranking can fight and kill them. Liang Haishan's tone turned solemn. The blood demons' patterns will appear on their foreheads. You can tell at a glance. If you encounter a 5-striped blood demon, run as far as you can. Chu Mu nodded. They chatted as they walked. Soon, they arrived at the location where the entrance to the blood demon realm was about to open. It was located at the foot of a mountain outside the inner mansion. Besides Chu Mu and Liang Haishan, many other people were rushing over from afar. They were extremely fast. Hundreds of people had already arrived. They seemed to be divided into many groups. Let's go. Our group is over there. Liang Haishan pointed ahead and said, "We are going to enter the first level of the blood demon realm. It is said that small blood demons don't usually move alone. So, in order to better hunt blood demons, everyone will work together." Liang Haishan, you're here. Chu Mu, let me introduce you. This is Zhang Xiyuan. He is at the peak of the initial success in the Qi transformation realm. This is Lu Yaoming. He is at the initial success in the Qi transformation realm. This is He Zhen. He is also at the initial success in the Qi transformation realm. Liang Haishan introduced to Chu Mu. There were 6 people in total. Including Liang Haishan, there were 7. All of them were at the initial success in the Qi transformation realm. However, some were strong, some were weak. This is Chu Mu. He is a new student. A new student? After staring at Chu Mu for a few breaths of time, Lu Yaoming frowned. He hasn't cultivated a new sword Qi art. At this time, he should be cultivating a new sword Qi art to temper his innate sword Qi and strengthen his foundation. He shouldn't be participating in such a dangerous mission. Liang Haishan, I know that you are a good person and take good care of new students. However, the blood demon realm is not an ordinary place. It is very dangerous. We can't even guarantee our own safety, let alone the safety of a new student, He Zhen said. Don't worry. Chu Mu is not weak, Liang Haishan hurriedly said. A new student who has just transformed his sword Qi into innate sword Qi. He hasn't cultivated any profound level sword Qi art yet. No matter how strong he is at most equivalent to an ordinary initial success in the Qi transformation realm. In a place like the Blood Demon Realm, he will be killed if he is not careful. He might even implicate others. Zhang Xiyuan, who was the strongest among them, also said, "How about this? You can follow us and increase your knowledge. We will also do our best to ensure your safety. However, you will not have a share of any harvest in the Blood Demon Realm. After you leave the Blood Demon Realm, you will have to pay each of us 3,000 credits." Yes, I think Senior Brother Zhang Xiyuan's suggestion is very good. Lu Yaoming and the others immediately supported him. You! Liang Haishan's face changed. He was about to burst into anger. Say no more. Chu Mu stopped Liang Haishan from continuing. As for whether or not he would hunt with the others, Chu Mu's attitude was that it was dispensable. In fact, he was even more inclined to act alone. Perhaps it would be more dangerous for him to act alone. However, he would hunt for his own harvest. There was no need to have a conflict over the distribution of the spoils. Forget it. I won't team up with you either. Liang Haishan angrily waved his sleeve and turned to Chu Mu. Let's team up. We can take care of each other. Alright. Since he had already said so, Chu Mu could not say anything more. He's dumbfounded. Zhang Xiyuan and the others began to whisper amongst themselves. More and more people arrived. Not only were there students from Astral 9, but there were also students from the other academies. It's him. Chu He, who was in the crowd, swept his gaze over the crowd. When he saw Chu Mu, he was slightly startled. When he took a closer look, he was immediately stunned. With Chu Mu's talent, he should not have been able to enter the inner mansion so quickly. Although he was very surprised, Chu He did not have any intention of coming over to greet him. Time slowly passed. It was already past the hour of the afternoon, but the entrance to the Blood Demon Realm still had not appeared. At this moment, there was a low commotion filled with astonishment. Chu Mu, look! It's Senior Sister Han Ruoxue. Liang Haishan tugged at Chu Mu's sleeve and spoke in a low voice. His tone was extremely excited, and his expression could not hide the trace of adoration. Chu Mu looked over and saw a graceful figure quickly leap over. She landed not far away and stood still. Her clothes were as white as snow, and there was a white jade belt around her waist that accentuated her slender waist. Her fine black hair flowed down her shoulders, and her tall and curvaceous figure made one's eyes burn with passion. Her pure white and smooth face glowed like white jade. Her delicate facial features complemented her beautiful face, and she was even more beautiful than the meticulously drawn portraits of beauties that were circulating on the internet back on Earth. She's like a snowflake on a lonely cliff, Chu Mu thought to himself. Han Ruoxue's temperament made him think so. The aura emanating from her body was very strong, and there were layers upon layers of fluctuations that were like the turbulent waters of the sea. Countless sharp edges were contained within, but they also contained traces of icy coldness. No one dared to approach within 30 meters of her, even though there were quite a few people who were itching to get closer. What a powerful sword chi cultivation! Compared to her appearance and figure, Chu Mu was more surprised by her sword chi cultivation. It was at least at the level of perfection of the chi transformation realm. Senior Han Ruoxue is also from Astral 9. 3 years ago, she entered the inner house. 2 years ago, she challenged the right to live in the heaven-level sword tower. A year ago, she successfully challenged an expert on the bronze sword ranking. Liang Haishan spoke in an excited tone as he looked at Han Ruoxue with reverence. Senior Han lives in the 5th heaven-level sword tower and is ranked 53rd on the bronze sword ranking. Bronze sword ranking. Iron sword ranking. Chu Mu could not help but connect the two. The outer house has the iron sword ranking, the inner house has the bronze sword ranking, and it is said that the king's palace has the silver sword ranking. Each ranking only has 100 places. Liang Haishan explained, if the outer house wants to be on the iron sword ranking, you need to challenge the small sword tower, but the inner house does not. It is said that the initial ranking of the bronze sword ranking is determined through various tests and battles. In the future, if you want to be on the bronze sword ranking, you must apply for a challenge from the headquarters of the Hall of Hundred Affairs. After you pass, you can challenge people on the bronze sword ranking. However, in order to avoid endless entanglements, there is a rule that if you want to challenge the bronze sword ranking, you must first have the right to live in the heaven-level sword tower, and you must consecutively defeat 10 students of the heaven-level sword tower. Each of the 10 inner houses had 100 heaven-level sword towers. Hearing that there were so many conditions to challenge the bronze sword ranking, Chu Mu could not help but be surprised. Other than a ranking, are there any other benefits? Asked Chu Mu. If it was only a title, then to him, it wasn't something he could do without. Of course there are benefits. The people on the bronze sword ranking get more credits every month. The higher the ranking, the more credit. In addition, you can also get a certain amount of spirit stones every month and have all kinds of priority. All in all, if you have the strength to be on the ranking, it's best to challenge it. Once you are on the ranking, you will be more valued. Liang Haishan said quickly and then said mysteriously, "Do you know what my dream is?" "What?" Chu Mu asked casually. "One day, to be able to be on the bronze sword ranking, even if it's the last place," Liang Haishan said, his tone full of yearning and encouragement. At this time, in an open space not far from the crowd, a strong aura suddenly spread out and permeated the surroundings. The air vibrated, and a wave-like roar spread out in all directions. Traces of blood-red aura appeared out of nowhere and spread out. Everyone's attention was immediately attracted. It's about to appear. The entrance to the blood demon territory. One by one, they held their breaths and looked slightly excited. More and more blood-red aura spread out and became more and more intense. Finally, these blood-red auras intertwined and condensed together, as if they were worshipping some kind of strange chanting sound. There seemed to be a force in the void that summoned the ancient gate from the distant void. A blood-red vortex appeared and quickly expanded until it was 5 meters in diameter. The entire blood-red vortex was spinning crazily and making whistling noises. The edges of the vortex were blood-red, and the color gradually deepened toward the center. The center was black, so black that it made people's hearts palpitate. Waves of strange aura were transmitted from the vortex and surged forward, making people shudder, as if they had been doused with ice water. They seemed to hear the roars of the blood demon. What was strange was that the sand and stones around the vortex did not move and were not affected at all, as if the vortex was just an illusion. The entrance to the blood demon territory has appeared. Let's go. As soon as someone finished speaking, Han Ruoshua turned into a streak of light and dived into the blood-red vortex like a snow-white rainbow. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.